to fight some like a bureaucracy from a nightmare. Take a number and get to the back of the line. You take a number and it just says infinity written on it. Like, that's how it felt. That's like, try and get your Twitter back. Take a number. It says like an incomprehensibly complex number. It's like 10 million to the E power. And you're like, yeah, I'd rather like commit suicide than live here anymore. But Elon bought Twitter and just started bringing people back. Oh, your account is back today. And political correctness started to subside. And all of a sudden, there was this realization that maybe change was possible. Maybe there could be political reform. Maybe change within the system was possible. And then suddenly, I didn't have these accelerationist tendencies. And honest to God, I said this in 2021. In 2021, around the time of January 6th, I said, look, banning people from Twitter, it is going to cause everybody to get more radical. I said, because the only reason people were moderating themselves, the only reason that people were coloring inside the lines is because they did not want to get banned from Twitter. And once everybody got censored and was forced onto Telegram, we said there's really no reason to moderate at all. We could just keep getting more and more extreme, and we did. I said, and we're going to just keep getting more radical, and we're going to do it in these underground channels, these unregulated underground channels, using these foreign services like Telegram or others, and that's what would happen, and it did. And then they brought us back, and it had the reverse effect. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that briefly because I think about it a lot myself. I think about how I tried to get in that mindset in 2022. I was like, dude, fuck yeah, Russia's gonna destroy NATO. This is awesome. And a lot of people said I was like a Russian plant. I was never a Russian plant, okay? I was never pro-Russia for its own sake. My argument then was basically accelerationism. It was that if Russia and China expanded, then American empire receded. And American empire was at its worst in terms of censorship and political control. But then things started to turn around. And that's why I have a lot less of an accelerationist tendency at this point than I did a couple years ago. Anyway, so that's that. But I do want to move on. We don't have time to cover the other stories, so we're just going to dive in and take a look at the super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say. Anyway, the reason I feel it's important to explain that is because as I've gotten older, I really do believe that a lot of people in this space are being manipulated at all times by foreign intelligence and money. And I'll go on the record and say I was never, ever involved in anything like that. You know, this show, I've never taken sponsorships. I've never, you know, been a part of Sputnik, or I think I did one interview on Russia Today. They never invited me back. But as I've gotten older, because I'm a young guy, I mean, I started when I was 18. As I get older, I realize that a lot of these people, they really are in bed with foreign intelligence, knowingly or unknowingly. And so I think it is really important to be transparent about what you think and why you think it. And if you change your mind, why you changed your mind. Because it's okay. People can change their minds. It's kind of ridiculous to say, especially young people, that you have to have the same position, and if you change your mind, it's super suspicious. But you have to be able to explain your thought process. And that should basically be an expectation that you should feel required to disclose that. It should be just like a disclosure requirement. You can change your mind, but you have to say how you changed your mind, when you changed your mind, and why. Have to explain the thought process. People can change their minds. People think about things and circumstances change. But you gotta be able to explain how you got from point A to point B. Because if you can't, that becomes very suspicious. You know, and this is relevant because we're talking about Tucker Carlson, we're talking about Candace Owens, we're talking about Elon Musk, And these are three people who I would never say that Tucker is a Fed because he changed his mind. He was a neocon, now he's a populist.
Come on.
It's possible that people change their minds. People legitimately do go from being neocons to populists, but you gotta be able to explain what your views are, specifically with specificity, and how you got there. Because if you can't explain the anatomy, if you can't explain the genesis of the idea, to me, that becomes very suspicious. You know, people can have epiphanies, people can have a breakthrough, but you gotta be able to explain it. That's why I feel the need to explain it, because, you know, people have, you know, when I did Alex Jones last week or 2 weeks ago, some caller came in and they said, hey, you got all this money and then you changed your mind on Russia. And it's like, I don't even remember what my position is on Russia, but I do remember in the past few years how I went from being a total pro-Russia guy to definitely more pro-America. And I could see where people would find a problem with that. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, but I do want to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. Somebody in the live chat says, Nick has been talked to. He is backtracking. They got to him. Backtracking on what? Name one position. I also think there is a great deal of that kind of sentiment. Some of it is just retarded. Some of it is controlled opposition, where it's like you always have to be the most extreme version of the idea. If you go back 10 years, I've been saying the same exact thing about Jewish power, race, all of it. But you start to say things like, you know, we shouldn't kill people, we shouldn't be hateful. You start to say things like we need to be proactive, we need to build rather than destroy, and people go, whoa, you're backtracking. And you go, wait a second, why is that considered a backtrack? But anyway, we're gonna move on. We'll take a look at the super chats, we'll see what you guys have to say. Let's take a look.
Zada sent $100. Nicholas, I want to commend and highlight your ability to distinguish the operable relevant from the mood. This is an underrated facet of your show and brilliance that we all do well to imitate. The ability to stay grounded, rooted, and with laser precision cut through the fog of war as you've done.
Thank you for the big super chat. What do you mean operable relevant? Distinguish the operable relevant from the moot? In terms of what? I don't even know what that means, but I appreciate the super chat.
Zada sent $100. The reality distortion field, as you mentioned yesterday, is worthy of blaze. In the beginning, what you say and think is shocking to people. Once the world hears how, the journey, it becomes plain to see. Thank you for everything.
What do you mean? I don't... Okay, am I having a stroke, or does this guy not make any sense? I highlight your ability to distinguish the operable relevant from the moots. Like, that as a sentence doesn't make sense. And then the second one, in the beginning, what you say and think is shocking. Once the world hears how, it becomes... Okay, I get that part. What is the reality distortion that's worthy of glaze? What does that mean? Okay, anyway, I don't know. Thank you for the big super chat. I kind of get what you're saying.
You're like a ship captain from Wall.
The fat guy?
Ryan Selkis sent $200. Half
I
people
know,
are
yeah.
objective, but not others. Teal wrote the diversity in 1995. Only non-Jewish players were Palantir after 9/11. Straussian moment paper in 2007. Red pilled 1,000s in tech on Renee Girard. Killed Gawker. Only major tech. Business endorsement of Trump in 2016. Biggest non-Jewish GOP tech donor. Moderating force on censorship on the meta board.
These aren't art. You're just giving me his biography. Yeah, I know all of this. You're just telling me his biography. He wrote the diversity myth. I know. He co-founded Palantir and isn't Jewish. Okay, not being Jewish doesn't actually matter that much. There are plenty of non-Jewish co-conspirators. Palantir is a front for Mossad, okay? Palantir is a surveillance device that is used by Israeli double agents and Israel itself. So being a non-Jewish co-founder of a Jewish front does not like a feather in your cap. Excuse me. He wrote the Straussian moment. Yeah, Strauss was a Zionist, okay? Peter Thiel, like many of them, is a Straussian, and Strauss is like essentially Jewish, if you know anything about Leo Strauss. Red Pill Thousands on Rene Girard. And what is Rene Girard's theory? Well, mimetic theory, what is it about? It's about a scapegoat. It's about how scapegoats are created because of how human beings have a natural intrinsic proclivity towards mimetic violence. They seek out scapegoats. I wonder who would benefit from such a theory. Killed Gawker, big deal. Endorsed Trump. Trump is Jewish. Biggest non-Jewish GOP tech donor. The GOP fucking sucks. Moderating force on the Meta board. In what fucking way? How did he have any influence on Meta?
Ryan Summit sent $200 to have deal receipts. Founders fund most vocally Christian partnership in Silicon Valley. Partner started Act 17. Invested in 5 next-gen AF politicians. Vance hit. Typical DC portfolio approach. Since his biggest tech risk is a global totalitarian surveillance state. First on Benedict XVI's thoughts on secularization and the eschaton. Don't have a blind spot. You're shooting one of our own.
Yeah, this is just, sorry. You're telling me his biography. This is not a compelling case at all. This guy's not on our side. I'll give you a million counter arguments. He's funding Yoram Hazony. Boom, done, end of story. He's in bed with Bari Weiss and Mark Andreessen. Boom, done, end of story. He defers to Israel on the use of facial recognition and Lavender at Palantir, which is run by Alex Karp. Boom, done, end of story. He's funding Sovereign House and Curtis Yarvin and Passage Press. They're all Jewish nationalists. End of story. You're wrong. Sorry, you're wrong. You are wrong. I appreciate the big super chats, but this insinuation I'm shooting myself in the foot, you have yet to make one good argument, a single good argument, one piece of evidence. You have nothing. I have a blind spot. Everything you told me, I know. Everything you just told me, I know, I have known for years. Believe me, it is not a blind spot. I know everything you just said. Fully aware. Not shooting myself in the foot. And I know things you don't actually. I know things I'm not even at liberty to say here. So just fucking stop. And don't tell me to retweet you again. Thank you for the big super chat. But for, you sound like a fucking grifter, honestly. I appreciate the super chat, but no, dude, JD Vance is not our friend. Peter Thiel is not our friend. That is not a blind spot. You have no idea what you're talking about. These Claremonsters, Straussians, Founders Fund, the problem is people like you. You think that you are using them. They are using you. People like you, Andrew Isker, all these other you are a useful idiot for Jewish nationalists who are infinitely more intelligent than you. And honestly, you deserve it. You deserve it. Because you just have no idea what you're talking about. He invested in next generation politicians. And like who? Like who? Joe Kent, who attacked me for not being pro-Israel? Like who? Patrick Witt, who fucking lost as insurance commissioner? Like who? Gibbs? Nice guy, but he lost? Wouldn't even take a meeting with me? Like who? I don't want to say anybody else, but very few of those people won. Blake Masters lost. That guy sucks. Vance won, and he's a fat piece of shit. So who the fuck are you talking about? And yeah, he's promoting all these Christian projects. Have you noticed that none of them criticize Israel? Isker's homesteading thing in Tennessee, which is being funded by those circles, those guys never criticize Israel. They're all Trump cheerleaders. You are wrong. He funds NatCon. NatCon is like a Jewish fifth column. It's run by Yoram Hazony. Peter Thiel and Vance speak there. And Hazony is a Kahanist. Peter Brimelow not allowed there. I'm shooting myself in the foot. Peter Brimelow is not allowed at NatCon. I'm not allowed at NatCon. Hazony is trash-talking me to Ethan Klein at the New York Times. Or Ezra Klein. I mean, not Ezra Klein at the New York Times. Steve Saylor and Lomez are shit-talking me at Passage Press. Peter Thiel funded. They're both Jews.
Signs you are cleared to attack.
Steve Saylor's a Jewish nationalist. Lomez is a Zionist. Curtis Yarvin's a Jewish nationalist. It goes on and on and on. I tried to speak at Sovereign House. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me. It's Jews only. No Israel critics allowed. So, like, dude, you're just wrong on this. J.D. Vance, he said we should bomb Iran. He went to an America First think tank and said we should arm Israel and bomb Iran. I mean, come on now.
We've taken objective Alpha.
It just doesn't get better than this. Yoram Hazony, they're his top guys. Vance, Rubio, Hegseth, they're Yoram Hazony's top guys. You're just wrong on this. You are wrong. You have, this is your evidence? You have fucking nothing. You gave me Peter Thiel's Wikipedia page. I've read it. I've read the Straussian moment. It's now it's a thing.
Fueled and ready. Pilots are cleared to engage.
Who else does Thiel support? Darren Beatty? Do you know that Darren Beatty was captivated by Leo Strauss? Why is he such a big fan of Heidegger? Because he thinks Heidegger's a more advanced Leo Strauss. And Darren Beatty grew up in Palau and Guam, another normal upbringing. Give me a break, dude. Give me a break. It's crazy. You're just wrong on this. It's insulting. You know, if you, it'd be one thing if you said, well, what about this? But you have this blind spot. Don't have a blind spot. You're shooting one of our, I don't even know who the fuck you are. Not one of mine. Don't have a blind spot. Believe me, everything you just said, I know. You are the one with the blind spot, obviously. Total ignorance.
Nathan Brana said $100. Grew up Protestant.
Someone says rage bait. No, it's not rage bait. This guy has been pestering me in the DMs. He texted Sam Hyde and said, hey, Sam, tell Nick to hit me back. Super chatting this, not like you're just fucking wrong. Stop. You're on Twitter talking about the Jews, then you come and bring me this shit? Then you lay this shit on me? This is not, unfortunately, I wish this was rage bait. Unfortunately, it's not rage bait. This is just plain old useful idiot shit. This is the stuff that gets me pissed off. People that should know better being useful idiots for the Jews.
Nathan Brana said $100. Grew up Protestant. Watched Michael Knowles for years. He preaches Catholicism, but I never pursued the Catholic Church until I found your show. I wonder why? God bless you, love you, brother.
Thank you for the big super chat. Appreciate it. He preaches Catholicism. I never pursued the church until I found her show. Wonder why? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know what the insinuation is. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is about Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh is they're just slaves. They're just slaves to Israel. And it's pathetic. I mean, they have kids. How are they going to explain to their kids that they're slaves to Israel? You know? They're all doing this shtick about, oh, I'm a dad, I'm a family man, I have kids, I'm mature. Yeah, but you are owned by Ben Shapiro. You can't talk about Israel because you work for Ben Shapiro. What does that say about you? You are a Catholic working for a Jew who hates you. They're either completely ignorant or they're complicit, which makes them traitors and cowards. But it's disgusting. And I say this like, look, I wish they would just join the winning team. Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, what's going on, man? What is going on? You call yourselves Catholics? What would Charles Martel have to say? What would the kings and queens of Europe have to say? It's unbelievable. The Jews collaborated with our enemies, with the Muslims, with the communists, with you name it, with the liberals and revolutionaries. It's crazy. And they try to fashion themselves as crusaders. Charles Martel would spit on you. It's unbelievable. So I just wish they would join the winning team. I wish they would get right with God, get on the right side of America. Working for Ben Shapiro in the big 2025. How do you justify that? How do you justify working for Ben Shapiro in 2025? Your boss, your colleague, is the arch neocon of America. He is synonymous with Israel first, and you work at his company, and you're a Catholic? You're America first? What a sorry state. You call yourself a man? You know, Matt Walsh has the gall to say virtue. He says, are you going to do the right thing when it's difficult? Don't talk to me about doing the right thing. Never use the word courage with me. Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, do not use, you're not allowed to use that word. You are a coward. You are a coward and a traitor. You work for Ben Shapiro. You might as well work for Mark Levin. You might as well work for Laura Loomer. At that point, you might as well work for Netanyahu. You practically do. And they downplay the Israel issue. It's all, for them, it's all just white grievance politics. It's slop. I watch Matt Walsh's show, and it makes me fucking furious. It's just slop. This doofus rolls up his sleeves with his flannel and his beard and says, but you're not allowed to say that. That's racist. White people are treated bad. White people, black people suck. How are more Somalis going to make America better? And it's just fucking slop. It is slop for stupid white people to eat up. Our country is occupied. Why are we bringing in Somalians? That's a good question. Why are we bringing in millions of immigrants from foreign countries? That's a good question. You want to know why? Because 100 years ago, a Jewish playwright said, we're a melting pot. That's why. Because for 100 years, we have been propagandized by a minority that does not see themselves as European, that is not Christian, that has told us what our values are, which is that we are a melting pot, we are diverse, we are pluralistic and tolerant. That's why. But they don't want to talk about that. They strategically avoid that. They want to play to white grievance politics. And look, don't get me wrong, like, they're right in what they say, but it's a half-truth. I saw Matt Walsh, he's doofus. He's talking about Somalian culture. He said, we're bringing Somalians here. He says, shouldn't we know something about their culture? What is Somalian culture? Culture. Culture? We don't need to look at Somalian culture to say we don't fucking want them here. Somalian culture? They're not even good racists. They're not even good racists. People like Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles are filling up the trough with slop for racists, and they're not even good racists. I'm the best racist of all of them. I'm the #1 racist on the planet, and I could say with authority, you are a terrible racist. It's about Somalian culture? Dude, it's because they're from fucking Africa. Well, their culture, we need to make an argument about Somalian culture to say they shouldn't set up an enclave in America? He uses words like assimilation. Assimilation? Their politicians are advocating on behalf of Somalia. We don't want them. We don't want them here. Enough said. We don't want them here. We don't want them. We don't need them. Enough said. Matt Walsh says, well, you know, with their culture's inferior. Just say you don't want a bunch of Africans here. Just say less, dipshit. Just say less, tough guy, racist. Say less, just say we don't. And, you know, it's like, that's valid, but they don't want to say that. They don't want to use these racial terms. They want to pander to racial sensibilities. They don't want to use racial terms. They're just running an edgier version of Ben Shapiro. It has everything to do with culture, nothing to do with race, and everything to do with culture. And pandering to this white grievance politics without actually getting to the crux of it, which is that we are an occupied nation. So the whole thing is just pathetic. It's like a white minstrel show. It's just white wigger identity politics. Chest beating, I don't want Somalians in my kids' schools because their culture's bad. You fucking pussy. Just say what you mean.
Army to accept $10. Hey Nick, my daughter turned me on to you recently. Not that you don't already know this, but you're very insightful, knowledgeable, and funny. Would love to see you in Florida sometime. God bless.
Thanks. When you say you'd love to see me in Florida, what does that mean?
Hitting Delta.
Like you would like it if you were walking down the street and you saw me there? Hey, that's Nick. What are you doing here? What? I don't understand the mind that writes this sentence. I don't understand what that means. I think what your infantile mind is trying to say is, I wish I could meet you. Is I think what you're trying to say is, I wish I could meet you. I would like it if I met you. Is I think the sentiment you're trying to get across. And the way you're expressing it is, would love to see you in Florida, which doesn't make any sense actually, but I appreciate it.
Wine War Palestine sent $250. Standing strong with your brother. God bless.
Thank you for the big super chat, man. We're standing with Palestine. We're standing with Gaza. We love you, buddy. Thank you very much for the support.
Bitcoin Def sent $500. Cut of the wages to the go. I was born Catholic but brainwashed by libertarians. For most of my life, I have seen my fix in the money system, which was enough to solve the big problems. But you helped me realize that the true fix must be political in nature, and indeed, ultimately spiritual. Personnel is policy. God is gracious. The devil is real. You are a pivotal part of bringing me back to Christianity. Thank you.
That's okay. I didn't know where that was going. You started to talk about like money, and I was like, this is going to be another Federal Reserve super chat. So thank you for the huge super chat. I appreciate it. I am glad to hear that. Yes, because these libertarians, they think that if we just got the money right, you know, then all the problems would fix themselves. And look, we are a political animal. We live in a society. We don't live in a system. We live in a society. We don't live in a mechanistic system. We live in an organism. Okay, society is organic. And so, you know, there is a certain type of personality that says, we just need a new constitution. We just need a new form of money. If only we did, you know, this new thing. Case in point, look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk came into the government and said, well, the problem is you just need a firmware update. He said, you know, we just need to get in there and put in our software, and we're going to cut all the spending, and we're going to fix the budget. He didn't realize it's a political problem. Because he showed up to Washington and said, we're going to cut Social Security. And people said, fuck no, you're not. And then you ran into problems in Congress and with the judges and with the media and with the voters and with all these different parties that you need to satisfy. And suddenly, in that moment, Elon Musk realized he's not a political creature. It is not a technical problem. It is a political problem. Our problem is a political problem. It is not a matter of plugging in a computer and, you know, getting Bitcoin right, getting the money supply right. It is a political problem, and it is politics is an art form. So I'm glad you see that. I appreciate the huge super chat. It's true. It's a spiritual, political battle.
Kurt Batman sent $25. RKD for NJF.
So true.
Yeah, I sent $25. Gentlemen, no more child's play. No more making work to be doing. You should actually use your skills and find your place. They will not be able to brush us off as Sunday. Let's be together. My luck. Put my hands for work. My fingers for that.
Who's with me? Gentlemen? All right, gentlemen, no more child's play. Bro thought he cooked. Bro, you are not tough.
Delta has been neutralized.
Trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. Brother, you are an anonymous super chatter. What are you talking about? Trains your hand for what? Pressing the buttons on the McDonald's cash register, pressing medium fry with Big Mac? Trains my hands to press medium fry with Big Mac. Trains my hands to flip over the iPad. What you're gonna wanna do is press that button there. It's just gonna ask you a quick question. Trains my hands to turn the tablet around. It's just gonna ask you a quick question there. Just tap skip. That's what your hands are being trained for, buddy. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah. Who's with me? Gentlemen, I love when the super chatters talk to the other super chatters. Like, thanks, but I don't need the help.
In that 2003 sent $20. Also, sorry for the question. If you do a massive performance, run to so was wondered.
I'm just teasing you. It's okay. I'm just giving you a hard time.
In that 2003 sent $25. Happy early birthday.
Thanks. Yeah, 27.
Adolf made now sent $20. Trump flying the B-2 bombers over Putin's
I'm
equivalent
old.
doing a touchdown celebration dance while being down 20-49 in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. Guys, 20.
Dude, I'm glad you said that because, yeah, all these, the usual suspects. Trump just did a B-2 flight over Vladimir Putin's head. Dude, we're losing. So pathetic. It's like when a black person holds like a stack of cash next to their head like a phone. You know, like a black person gets like $300 and they're like fanning it out. I got money, nigga. I got all this money. Trump driving in front of the helicopters and planes. Like, dude, you're not gonna do shit. You're not doing shit. Russia won. So it's just embarrassing, you know? That's just embarrassing. You're not gonna use that. So corny is right.
Sam Strong, you sent $50. Fuck African Americans. White power.
Oh.
$11. Do you think blackberry bubbly wine is safe to drink on an ancestral green egg? Extra sugar please. Wink and wink. Nick sent $27. 27 for 27. Hope you enjoy your weekend and have a great birthday.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Sent $25. How to love Jesus without reaching the pits of despair. Most Christians are never suffering the world before recognizing the end. I know you've been persecuted, but it seems your faith preceded your streaming career.
It did. Well, you know, look, for me, it's like everything else. I have a rich interior life. Maybe you can't relate to that. A lot of people just do not. But I've always had a very rich interior life. Being super intelligent does that to you because you don't really get along, you know. Not to sound like an indigo child or whatever, but you know, when you are super intelligent, you don't really relate to anybody. You don't really get along with anybody. You turn inward. So I've been a very interior person my entire life, and for me, like everything else, it was just a ton of reflection.
Enemy helicopter!
And I went away to college, and in like 3 months, I became extremely Catholic because I just thought about my life. You know, that transition in my life made me realize I was going to die. You know, going away from my parents, it made me realize my parents are gonna die, I'm gonna die, everyone I know is gonna die. In that moment, I sort of saw my entire life. And it made me realize that the world is imbued with meaning, that it's not just material. You know, that it's not, that the universe is not just mechanistic, it's not just material, but there's a meaning-making dimension. There's a layer above where there are qualitative things. They're real. You know, form and intention and meaning. Like these are intelligibility. These are all things that are real. They're not subjective. They exist in reality. And that's just what made me religious. And then it doesn't take you long to go from being religious to being a Christian, in my opinion. So that was it for me, but it didn't require a ton of suffering.
$15. Hey Nick, my country Norway is having its elections the 8th of September. This week the day after this country is on inflation from Norway. But can you give shout out to Norway Democrats? Our only hope.
I don't know anything about that. But sure, if they're friends of the AFD, then sure. Good luck. I love when people from these European countries are like, could you give a shout out to Norway? Norway, dude. Yeah, shout out Norway. W Norway in the chat. I kind of want to go to Norway. I want to live in a cave in Norway. I want to live in a frozen cave like a Yeti. That's my ideal climate. Then I never have to wear a short sleeve shirt ever again.
On point sent $50. Hey Nick, please check your blog email for on point.
Okay, well.
Ryan Geiger % $50. I couldn't think of any good bait. No message sent $22. Public outrage is a constraint on presidential power is largely a myth. The slop eaters will say, you know, we can't do mass deportations or mass incarcerations because of the blowback. It's like he brazenly buried the Epstein files and went to war in Iran and his approval ratings are unchanged.
Yeah, very true. I agree with that.
Golf Spike sent $20. Take on Nux. And Andrew Esquire did a stream today where Nux was asking why you are in jail for storming the Capitol and other BS. They discussed that and other things about you for about 10 minutes, maybe more, but I didn't watch the whole thing.
Who? I love how you rattle those off like those are, dude, Tectone, Crux, and Fleabag, we're talking about you. Who? Are these, what is this? Is this Pokemon? I don't know what that is. Dude, Deftone, Blux, and... Yeah, I don't know who that is, but I appreciate the super chat.
Rising Ashes 1945 sent $100. Leather Apron Club recently dropped a 2-hour-long video on YouTube named The Lie of Qatari Influence. In the video, he exposes the hypocrisy of mainstream news attempt to alarm everyone on how Qatari money is shaping foreign policy, while also just being a fraction of the money and influence compared to IPAC with its mass wealth and power it has over Congress.
Thank you for the big super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, I started watching that. I didn't finish it yet, though. He's great. He's excellent. One of my favorite content creators. Leather Apron Club. Great guy. Yeah, we got to enlist him in some way. I wanna work with him. I want to help him in some way because he's really great.
Otto's Revenge sent $25. Lil nigga, real nigga, God bless you in America first.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Sent $25. First learned about you from Dick Masterson, and I've been catching some of your streams since the Tucker and Candace stuff. Any chance we'll see you on a Dick show again?
Yeah, maybe next time I'm out in California. I would love to do it. I love Dick Masterson. Great guy. Super funny. OG, too. Total OG. Dick Masterson red-pilled me. It's so funny getting to meet these guys because, like, all of them red-pilled me. Like, I watched Dick Masterson on Dr. Phil when I was, like, 12. And I thought it was hilarious. And it red-pilled me on feminism. Like, no joke. I don't know how old I was young, but like watching those Dick Masterson highlights on Dr. Phil, like that planted a seed when I was a kid. And watching Sam Hyde when I was 17 planted a seed about the Jews. And watching Alex Jones and watching Gavin McInnes was huge. I watch Gavin McInnes like every day when he was on Rebel News. And it's so crazy now that I'm older. It's like now I get to hang out with all these guys. It's like before I was a sentient adult, I was a fan. It's crazy. It's so weird. It's like, it's the Ninja Turtles thing. So anyway, yeah, so I'd love to do it.
Old Man G sent $100. Donation to my favorite Roman Legionnaire. Looking lean, looking virile.
Thanks. Really? I feel like I'm getting fat again. I've really been eating like a pig lately. I gotta stop. That's why I've been feeling so bad, because it's just been like a binge. Just Culver's, Papa John's, Raising Cane's, fried chicken, pizza. It's gotta stop. I've been trying to get a grip a little bit. Anyway, but thanks.
Mateo Klein 472 sent $10. Nick, you're wrong about Putin. Russia is an exterior power, so they are protected from infiltration. This is basic world systems theory. The global Jewish system of finance and power is built around the West. Anything on the periphery can undermine and threaten collapse, so we should support Russia.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
English Romantic sent $20. Allegedly, we are guilty of the sin of racism. Vatican II condemns discrimination. In a Catholic context, this means violating human dignity, pacem in terris, which they won't or cannot explain. By violating my right to speak the truth, they are violating my human dignity. Is the truth a sin? God forbid. Proverbs 12:22.
That's so convoluted. God created the races. Racism. What do you mean? First of all, racism is not a fucking word. You liberal Christians, you can try all you want to make racism a sin. Racism is not a real thing. Okay? Racism, I don't even know what that means. But these fucktard liberals, try as you might, you will never make racism a sin, which basically means if I don't like your attitude about race, I get to use the catechism as a bludgeon. Fuck you and shut up and fuck off.
FR still sent $25. The juxtaposition of Trump next to Putin is embarrassing for us. He just rambles on about himself and how bad the Dems are.
Yeah.
Getting very old. No poise or professionalism.
So embarrassing, so embarrassing.
Boy Kid from Chicago sent $100. You up?
I'm up. Thank you for the big super chat. I appreciate it.
Isaac Steer sent $10. I just recently found your clips, and ever since then I've been going down the Rabbi D hole, learning about the true world we live in. These people apparently pray to Saturn and the Black Cube. Very scary stuff. I prayed for the first time ever in my life the other day.
It is pretty freaky. Once you know the deep dive on all that. The Black Cube, very disturbing stuff.
Sent $20. Did you see Elaine can leave her minimum security prison during the day for work just like Jeffrey had? Mueller short leaked.
I did see that, yeah. They made a deal.
753 sent $10. Trump deploys thousands of National Guardsmen to clean up the city, and all I've heard is a single guy getting arrested for throwing a sandwich. Some fucking king.
Yeah, dude, that was hilarious.
Godsey sent $15. Nick, I'm 1/4 Irish. Nibba, you 100% surly American leprechaun with a Spanish surname who thinks he's Italian. Green heart emoji. No Final Friday? Shucks.
That's rage bait.
Centaur K sent $10. Did you watch Nick Fuentes hate food KS Candace Owens? Maxim Riz on X?
No, and I'm not.
Jacob sent $10. Nick, what do you think about creating America First communication system / social media platform?
Kill yourself. Just
Christine in Ohio sent $10. I'm a 30.
kill yourself today.
Christine in Ohio sent $10. I'm a $30 subscriber, but I'm so obsessed with MJF. I should do $100 instead of these super chats. This house has you on TV all day. See, you could have come to Ohio for your birthday. I could have booked you for Odie and Kielbasa. I'm excited for your birthday. Did you get your present from last year? Rolling on the floor with an emoji.
Did you get your present? No.
Enemy still present.
Because I got something for you. I'm coming, Christine. Christine, you thought you could sneak up on me? You thought you could put a bomb in my mailbox? Man, I am gonna sneak up on you so fast. I'm gonna be crawling out from under the food truck, throwing ninja stars at you. Me and Christine,
All right, attack
this
next
cycle
center.
of
Secure the
violence
enemy
has to
position.
stop. Me trying to kill Christine, Christine trying to kill me. It's crazy, man. When are we gonna give it up? It's like John Wick over here. I'm like John Wick. She's like that Chinese guy that loves John Wick. And John Wick 3.
Objective marked. We need you
It's the
supporting
cycle. It's the
attack.
cycle of mimetic violence. We need a Girardian sacrifice. No, but no. I like the super chats more. The super chats, because then we get to talk. Then we get to rap with each other, you know. But I appreciate the super chat. I'm coming for you, Christine. I got your birthday present. Oh, I got your birthday present. It's coming for you. It's hurtling towards you. No, I'm teasing you.
Cogburn sent $20. I know Vance has the limited hangout going on, but wouldn't he still be optically better than Steve Bannon?
No, dude, he's ugly and fat.
Penis Roiber sent $10. It's almost on. Roiber.
Can't wait.
Refund Yourself sent $100. Ron Nichols and RefundYourself.com wish you a very happy birthday, Nick. Go.
Thank you for the big super
Indian
chat.
Roy Pro sent
Appreciate
$15.
it.
I appreciate everything you do. Happy early birthday. I'll be 28 next month. I know how it is being an old man. Try to enjoy it. You earned it. You are the voice of the generation of my kids, and I pray for you. You'll be a top tier dad when you decide to. No rush. I'm not one of those AF4 live.
Well, you kind of are because you said it, but yeah, man, it just sucks getting old. You know what I saw? I saw a TikTok of this like old, really old guy dancing, and I just thought like, wow, like I have to kill myself as soon as possible. I saw this guy who was like 50 and he was doing one of the TikTok dances, and I was like, this is cooked. This is what it is. This is cooked. Now, the only thing you can do is just stay skimpy. That's it. I'm convinced that so much of what is bad about getting old is getting fat. Because you know what it is? It's not just getting old, it's that all these old guys are like fat slobs and they dress like shit. So it's not just that they're old, they just look like a dork. They look like a big fat dorky slob. Now, if you're older but you're like rail thin, if you're like 45 but you're really skinny and are wearing like a fitted suit, you could get away with it. You know, if you're still handsome, tasteful, facial hair, you know, like a slim fitting suit, you could get away with it. Or if you're jacked, if you look like, you know, like a beast, but it's harder because you lose your testosterone. But if you look like a beast when you're in your 40s, then that works too. But like 40% of it could be avoided if you just don't get fat and if you don't wear like cargo shorts and New Balances, you know? But yeah, but I saw this old guy dancing and I was like, wow, is that what it's gonna look like? Because you look at like the kids dancing and you're like, man, to be like a hot kid, being like a hot teenager has to be the, like, that's probably better than being the king of the universe. Like, would you rather be the king of the universe, but you're 55? Or would you rather be like the best looking 18-year-old at a rich high school? You know what I mean? Would you rather be like the sexiest teenagers at the richest high school in a city like LA? They have it better than anyone who has ever lived and will ever live. It's just depressing to be anybody else. So... But that's, life is about coping and dealing with that, you know? But it is depressing. Live chat's not like, hot teenager, that sounds kind of gay. You know, there's not hot teenagers. 18 and 19, of course. 18 and 19, of course, is what I mean. You guys are faggots. You guys are fucked up.
Lane sent $75. Hi, Nick. You should make people audition to be in an exclusive group chat. Only the best
But that's
guys are
just
allowed.
true.
Love watching your show and just bought Pinheads and Patriots. Hope you have a happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Oh, an audition? Why, you think you would make it through?
Backwards sent $20. When Rennie Wolf wrote the song Sexy Village, she was thinking about you. Hey. Midnight City sent $10. Hey Nick, fellow Catholic Chicago here. Shout out to Tom Skilling, Stan Dooley, and Brian Erlacher's hair. Happy early birthday, bro. I'd be happy to get you a depression dog at Gene and Jude's or get up Superdog. I'll have an old style. Peace be with you and your family. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks.
Luke James sent $50. I've been praying every other day since I started watching. Hard to imagine I used to be a young devout Christian. Was raised Baptist and things were confusing and I lost my way as a teenager, but I'm so glad I came across the heart-pounding Instagram edits. God sent me here. I couldn't even tell you what made me think I'm a search Nick Fuentes. Latin cross emoji. Saluting face emoji.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
The Lost King sent $30. New super chatter here. Just wanted to thank you for the fire you sparked in me with Catholicism. Turns out we share the same birthday too. So happy birthday, Master. Prayers to you and your parents. It's tough pill to swallow, but the strength you show is truly inspiring.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sent $10. Roll open your eyes. Eye emoji. The global reset already happened when the 10 Americas issued their bonds. Sneaker is literally the distraction. Small emoji. Putin equals Peter the Great. Zelensky equals Napoleon and Sweet from Macy's.
All
Skull
right.
emoji. Skull emoji. This is literally history. Inquisitor sent $10. Andrew's right. Once Germanics deport non-whites, they'll 100% go notice and target Slavs and Mids next. Many hate and say they want to harm or even kill anyone non-Germanic. Joe, Art, William Pierce, for example. Pagans and anti-Christians do it all the time and say Christians are divisive. Scooter sent $10. New Glory renewed. America first was anti-Semitic. Fuck. The ADL is anti-America. Nick 36 sent $10. I can't stop thinking about a super chat from a few weeks ago.
It hurts.
In short, the reason we temporarily stopped the censorship is to let AI learn more and think about it, the more plausible it seems. What do you think? Love you, brother. You are the
Yeah, I answered that super chat when they sent it, so.
$15. Just got my love the show tonight, my nigga.
Good, glad to hear it.
BattleField Fred sent $20.
Great.
Speaking about the game of empire, have any thoughts on Ray Dalio's changing world order or the fourth turning? Do you agree or disagree that America is in a decline? Just like many previous empires, and we're just arranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Or keep your chin up. Don't get lost still.
Hate all that shit. Hate all that shit.
You going to your 10-year high school reunion?
Fuck no. Why would I hang out with a bunch of losers that are poorer than me? Thank you for the big super chat. 10-year high school reunion. Really? I got shit to do, buddy. I'm taking 2 phone calls at once with famous people, and I'm rich. You think I'm gonna go to my high school reunion, hang out with a bunch of fucking losers? I don't think so. I might go. Maybe I'll go and just flex. Then again, I feel like to go and flex is pathetic because it's like I care about your approval. Like I give a fuck about the people I went to high school with. That are, you know, this losers at some local bank. My dipshit friend is working at some bank. He got fat and is losing his hair. He's 3 feet tall. Fuck, I need approval. I'll fucking kick the shit out of him. I'll fucking hire 10 people, 10 voipers that'll fucking kill him on the spot. They'll go to jail for it. I'm gonna go, I gotta impress these people. The other guy, one guy's working at the forest preserve. One guy's working at the local bank. Another guy's like some realtor or something. I gotta go and impress them. I don't even think so. I don't even think so. There's a shout out, by the way, for the old group chat. They kicked me out.
Beef is gay sent $10. Do you have any inside baseball on the state policy network?
No, I do not.
Orthodox Pape sent $15. My whole family watched you from the living room TV tonight. Last night, my mom walked into the room and said, "Is this guy the new Ben Shapiro?" After hearing you articulate, I said yes and then turned to my brother and said, "But not evil. You're going mainstream. Keep pursuing truth. God bless."
Let's go.
Antonius 1389 sent $20. Red heart emoji.
Thank you.
Details sent $10. What probability do you think there is that the current orchestrated immigration crisis in the West is part of what Alexander Dugin wrote about in Foundations of Geopolitics? Do you think that there is a collusion between all global rulers to create total global social disharmony for control? Force Bronco sent $10. The Catholic Church helped the Ottomans sack Constantinople and kill 40 Christians, and that's not the only time they helped Muslims. Your geopolitics is fantastic, but your Christian theology is utter dog shit.
Yeah, you lost. This is just, see, this is like when Southerners talk about the North. Here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to explain to you. In life, there are winners and losers. There are leaders and followers. There are those that fuck, and then there are those that get fucked. And I'll let you in on a little piece of timeless wisdom. Those that fuck do not care at all about the people that are getting fucked. Don't care. Winners do not care about losers. Leaders do not care about followers. It is those that get fucked that care. So the South hates the North. The North doesn't give a shit about the South. The descendants of the slaves hate white people. We don't give a shit. Fine, have some reparations like we give a shit. We're all rich and we're all having fun. The Orthodox Christians hate the Catholics. We're in Rome, nigga. We don't care. We're in Rome. We got the Pope. We're in Rome. We're good. Orthodox, what is that again? You know, it just feels good to be on the winning team. I'm American, I'm Catholic, I'm a Yankee, I'm white. Winning team. 4 for 4, winning team. It's everybody else. Hates America, hates Catholics, hates whites, hates the North. You lost. Sorry, buddy. Seethe. Yeah, oh, the Catholics sold out Constantinople. What's that? Sorry, wait, what? Oh, you mean Istanbul. Oh, I didn't know what you meant. Sorry. You mean that city that stopped existing 500 years ago? Look, and it's a shame. I'm sorry that happened to you guys. It's a shame. But don't come crying to us. Don't come crying to the city that still exists. Sorry that happened to you. Why don't you take it up with the real leader of Christianity, the Pope? Okay, pal? Why don't you take it up with the Pope before you go to hell, because there's no salvation outside the church.
Wallace sent $20. Can you elaborate on that grievance at PF, and would you ever do a show with Thomas?
I've elaborated on that a million times, and no.
Luke 777 sent $10. You are the best streamer alive. Keep up the great work and good on you for calling out these dorks giving you fitness advice. You have a build of a Pokemon trainer, and that's good enough for me.
I have the build of a Groiper. Look, Groiper is our mascot. I am a Groiper. So I don't see anything wrong with that, actually.
Moonsoon sent $10. Curtis Yarvin funded the Tate brothers. Why didn't you call that out during the podcast? Interesting how soft Tate was. Almost seemed like he was sending warnings out or trying to put you back in the cage.
Curtis Yarvin did not fund the Tate brothers. The Tate brothers are worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. That is not true. And I pressed Tate. I asked him about Vance. He gave an answer. What did you want me to say?
$100.
Thank you for the big super chat. I appreciate it. Oh, man.
John and from
Keep
sent $11.
burping.
You're the last real nigga alive. From your Dominican Groiper.
That's true.
Promo Denouncer sent $10. Exec Director of Israel's National Cyber Directorate arrested in Vegas child predator ring sting. It's on /Paul/.
Oh, it's on poll?
Earl,
Israeli pedophile just flew over my house.
Earl McFord sent $10. Hey, Nick just got out of the Matrix. What can you tell us about the Epstein stuff and Maxwell?
Okay.
Robert Hansen sent $20. Ah, you're angry tonight. I thought you were just a humble hat salesman. Happy. I love Solace sent $10. Jim Bro here. You should do lean both. It would complement your narrow physique while gaining. Vortex Pro sent $500. No message.
Thank you for the big super chat. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mr. I love KFC sent
No
$10.
message.
Almost 27, you're reaching unk status. Happy birthday.
I know.
Kenneth Elliott sent $10. Just beat the shit out of my mom and stole her credit card for this Plaza Read. PP. Ruby219 sent $10. Lol White Minstrel. D14 Monday Y8S sent $14. How? Jack Hacker sent $15. You should touch Candace's interior life.
Hey, come on now. That's disgusting. I have the best of intentions with Candace, okay? I will bring her home by 10. I'll be a good sport. George, I'll have her home by 9. I promise.
Peter Wish question sent $200. I would never propose to tell the goat what to do. Only I love it. Regarding PDD's comments, he is not in it for the same reasons at all. Keep doing what you are doing and they will come to you.
Okay, thank you for the big super chat.
Dump Matsumoto fan account sent $25. Please have Dumanat on to talk about his writings about Kevin McDonald. The new edition of Culture of Critique is coming out soon.
That sounds incredible.
Colonel the Law sent $15. Ryan Selka's most recent tweet is a Laura Loomer retweet roll. Talk about not getting it. Gerard sent $10. That reminder on the AI moratorium removal paid dividends. I have one request. Gerard's theory is sound. You yourself admitted to subscribe to mimetic theory. Expand on the Strauss and Maimonides relationship for those of us who spend our days becoming, elite human capital.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not anti-Gerard. I think Gerard has a lot of interesting things to say. However, you can see how look, if you don't understand Leo Strauss, I'm not against Plato. I'm not against Machiavelli. Okay? I'm not against Nietzsche necessarily. Not all of it. But the whole Straussian conceit is that there is this hermeneutic where you're going to read Jewish nationalism into Plato and Machiavelli and Gerard and the rest of them. You're going to read secular humanist rationalism into these different philosophers. That's sort of the whole point.
Jackson sent $10. Nick, have you ever been up to Alaska? Anchorage and Fairbanks are ass.
No.
But Southeast towns as well as interior AK are beautiful. God bless and love from Fairbanks.
No, but I want to go.
Ethos over equity sent $10. Been tuning in since your generational run ever since your clips have been popping up in my feed and I can see what all the hubba is about. I've never really been a political guy nor stab/finance. I know you don't hate anyone, so as an Indian American Catholic first gen I laugh at the G jokes.
I like it. Look, I love everybody. I love everybody. I like anybody that's high IQ. Anybody that's high IQ and fun and funny. So I appreciate it.
Smooth Brain sent $33. The Elon take baby farming versus European extinction is a false choice. In 1347, the Black Death killed 35% of people when they had 40% infant mortality. We survived many abysmal eras without giving kingdoms away to dumb nations.
Yeah, I agree with that.
D14 Monday Y8S sent $14. How cooked are we? Be real how we can break these chains, bro. Nick Bear sent $10. Michael Jackson's wife reported that he was a virgin on their wedding night at 35. Goats think alike. Owen Ribeiro sent $25. Agree with everything you said about Trump over the last year, but a B2 over Putin's head was pretty raw and I can't hate on that power move. Love the show and happy birthday, my G.
Yeah, because you're a goy.
Snowy Storm sent $10. Hey Nick here from NYC. Just wanted to say how I hate that Jews just run everything and are everywhere. God bless.
Okay.
Ruby219 sent $10. I can predict the future. You will never actually meet. Athena sent $10. What happened with that Zionist billionaire in that data sale? I don't think you did anything. I just can't find any real information. Please explain. Also, ATN already have intelligence community connections. We are everywhere lol. Groiper Army. Crack Candace, crack Candace, crack Candace.
You're talking about Pale Horse. I never met with billionaires. I have met with billionaires, but not them. I was at the Pale Horse office. I'm not going to tell you who I met with, but I did not meet with Tim Dunn. I did not meet with the Wilkes brothers. They were not there. I did not meet them. They don't know who I am. They didn't even know the meeting was happening. The meeting was not with the money. The meeting was not... I'm not going to say who it was because I don't want to get that person or those people in trouble. But I did not meet with Tim Dunn. I did not meet with the Wilkes brothers. It was not to get money. I did not get money from them. I wasn't there to ask for money from them. I did not meet with them. They did not know I was there. And as far as the data sale, that is just made up. That is a made-up lie. There is no data. We barely even have fucking data, okay? I mean, we have an email list from our customers. We use that. We don't sell that. We don't give that out. We don't use that for anything other than our own promotional stuff. We use the email when we put the subscriptions for sale. So the email thing, that is just a complete, utter fabrication. There is no evidence of anything like that. There was never a conversation about that. That is not real. That is made up out of cloth. And as far as the billionaires go, did not meet with them, do not know them. They do not know about me. One day I will tell that story when the person I did meet with is no longer in a position where it would hurt them, but I can't tell that story today. So, it's incredible how people just make shit up like that.
Pinnock sent $10. Name a country that starts with W.
Country that starts with W. Let's see. W. Is there one? Okay. Country that starts with W. This better not be like a trick question. I'm trying to think. I don't think there is a country that starts with W. Oh, it'd be West. Something West. Something West. Right? Are there any countries called West? There's Western Sahara, but that's not a country. There's West Germany was one, but not anymore. There's this is a trick question, I'm gonna be mad. There's East Timor, but that's not West. That's East. Wrong thing. Wrong letter. I don't know. I don't know. I can't. One of them is not coming to mind immediately. I would have to just go through and like think of every country that exists. Yeah, I don't know. Nothing's coming to mind. There's Bologna in Belgium, but that's not a country. I can't think of it. What is it? Wales? That's not a country. It's not a sovereign state. I guess it's a country, but it's not a sovereign state. Okay, there is no country that starts with W. Okay, so it's, well, I got some, but none that are. Let's see. Are there any sovereign states starting with W? I'm just gonna go in alphabetical order. There are, okay, so there aren't any. Yeah, I was gonna say. I got a few though. Even though, they're not sovereign countries. Nice, nice going. Nice trick question.
Nicholas J. Bonner sent $10. Tate is not worth hundreds of millions. He won Captain Senate.
At this point, I think he might be. I think that's
D14
legit.
Mondate Y8S sent $14. Wasn't the Catholic Church infiltrated by the Jews? The protocols of the elders of Zion mention this.
That's arguably yes. If you look at how Nostra Aetate came to be, that was like straight up Jewish infiltration. So yeah.
Pandone Karaoke sent $10.
But it has not corrupted the magisterium.
Pandone Karaoke sent $10. Happy early birthday to you and Claro. Generation 1 is almost in its 10th year. You're the best to ever do it. Folded hand. Grand Animal
Thank you.
Fuckface sent $10. Roast beef, a chicken, some pizza Nick on his Patrick Star ass diet. Jay Starrett sent $10. Hoping you are
Very
familiar
good.
with what I'm asking, but do you think Maurice Joly was exposing the same Jewish influence in France that Golovinsky did in Russia? As you went down this rabbit hole, shit's wild.
Maurice, I don't know who Maurice Joly is.
Newton sent $20. Hey Nick, what do you think of the American Reformer? I seen you follow the founder. Do you ever read it? Big fan.
What's American Reformer again? You have to remind me, all that shit sounds the same. Who's the founder of American Reformer? Let's see. Anybody know who it is? I'm on the website. There's no name for it. I don't know. Maybe.
Mark King sent $10. How would we convert the older generation into what we believe? My dad already hates Jews, but I want him to understand what.
Okay. We don't hate anybody.
David Berg sent $40. Carlson and even Kirk called out the rich Jews, which was funding the anti-white Ivy Leagues, and how quickly they pulled funding from the unis afterwards. But they don't talk about it enough. Trump hasn't mentioned Larry Fink's DEI, possibly because BlackRock told him they will buy more Truth Social shares in the future.
Gosh.
Diesel
Yeah.
sent $10. Do you
Good
follow Zero
point.
Hedge political commentary? I'm curious how you assess its influence and credibility given the lack of information.
Not a big fan of Zero Hedge, I'm going to be honest. Okay, all right. Yeesh. That's all I got for you. That's our last super chat. That's it for me this week. Remember to smash the follow button, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. I'm on the air Monday through Friday. Thank you to our top super chatters tonight. Huge thank you to Bitcoin Dev, Vortex Groiper, Ryan Selkis. Even though you're wrong, thank you. YNWA Palestine, Zathaz, The Druish Question, Canuck, Nathan Vrarnus, Rising Ashes, Old Man G, Goy Kid from Chicago, Refund Your Solana, and Florabama Groiper. Thanks to all of them. Thanks to all the super chatters, everybody that watches the show. We love you. I'll see you on Tuesday. Until then, have a great weekend. Have a great rest of your evening.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
So first, before we dive into all of the information, I do want to do a quick recap of some of the things that I saw that led me to do this show. I'm going to show you two clips. Now, forgive me because they are a little bit long. One is 2 minutes, the other's 3 minutes. That doesn't sound long, but you know, that's a good chunk of change for me to be sitting here watching the clips. But I want to play for you a couple of clips. These are compilations of clips that have been sourced from C-SPAN and various sources by sources like Paul Town, Uncommon Sense on Twitter. This is really a grassroots effort of a lot of people on Twitter that have scoured the internet for this information And they were inspired to do this by the show last week. It raised some red flags, some alarm bells. They got inspired. They went out, they did the deep dive, and they found this information. Now, it was because of these clips that I did this show. The first one I'm going to show you is a composite of about a half dozen different clips going all the way back to the 1990s. Now, last week, when Tucker did his big attack on me with Candace Owens, the big lie that stood out to everybody, maybe the cause for everybody to give me a chance and listen to what I had to say, was this. He called me a lot of names. He said I'm a weird basement dweller, I'm gay, all these different things. He said I'm a bad faith actor. I'm trying to poison the well of the legitimate America First right with a toxic association. He compared me to David Duke. He said a lot of things. And these are all things that have been said about me before. All the different attacks. You've heard them, I've heard them, we've heard them for years. That's not new. And some people called it cowardly and dishonorable. Some people cheered it on, honestly. The big thing that stuck out from his show last week is something that could not be ignored. It was a brazen and bald-faced lie. This is the central problem, and maybe the central thing that he said, which again was cause for people to give me some consideration and watch the show last week. He said with Candace, and I'm about to play the clip for you just now. He said with Candace that he did not know that his father was involved in the CIA until his father died. And his father died in March of 2025, earlier this year. Not only did he say that he did not know his father was involved with the CIA, he said he was actually shocked. He was shocked and surprised that he found out very late in his life. His father was appointed by Ronald Reagan in the late 1980s to work for the U.S. Information Agency, hand in glove with the CIA. And they were behind such things as the CIA covert backing of the Contras in Nicaragua. They were behind the propaganda surrounding Tiananmen Square in China in 1989. So his father was involved in some serious stuff. And Tucker says that he did not know, again, until just about a few months ago that his dad was involved in the CIA. Well, everybody really had the same thought, which is, I think I've heard Tucker say, though, in the past, that he knew his father was in the CIA. And it didn't take long for people to find the evidence. And so last week on Friday, we found the clip from last year. Tucker Carlson did a show with Sean Ryan, another former CIA officer. This was in June of last year. And Tucker said at that time, I knew my dad was in CIA. I knew he was in that world. And so everybody said, wait a minute, irrespective of my favorability towards Tucker or my antipathy towards Nick Fuentes, they said something's not right here. That's a bald-faced lie. You got caught. Last year he said he knew. This year he says he was surprised, shocked to find this information out in March. So which is it? Something is not right here. Something is out of place. And what's more, the logical next question is, why would he lie? Why would he lie in such a brazen way about something like this? This isn't your usual white lie. If Tucker himself applied for CIA, if his father was CIA royalty in broadcasting, and Tucker's an international broadcaster, this does raise legitimate questions. And if Tucker is not being forthcoming about this, but is instead lying or obfuscating or concealing, it invites an investigation. It says, what else are you lying about? If you lied that you didn't know your dad was CIA, are you lying that you are CIA or the extent of your cooperation with CIA? That was a natural question. But we did more digging over the course of the last week, and we found about half a dozen other clips that Tucker knew and said publicly that his father was involved in the CIA. So I'll play this compilation for you right now, and we're gonna react to it. This is the first clip. It's about 2 minutes, and I'll play this right now. All of this has come to light over the course of the past week, and this is a big reason why I did this show. So here it is.
And he's attacking my dad as a CIA, his dad's in the CIA or whatever. And I'm like, well, that's no, untrue. And my father dies, and I learn, actually, yeah, was involved in that world. I was completely shocked by it. So no one has to believe me, but that's just a fact.
Right.
This was in March of this year. And so when I applied to CIA, and I've taken a lot of crap, including from Putin, like, oh, you're from a CIA family. Well, yeah, obviously my father worked in conjunction with CIA. I mean, that's what that is. And I tried to join the CIA.
He had a bunch of them. He ran the Voice of America for a long time, maybe 5 or 6 years. He was an ambassador in Africa, and then he ran something called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
I mean, the guy who took out Mossadegh lived on my street. Roosevelt, CIA officer. So, I mean, again, I grew up around this stuff, but
that's why it's not happening.
But they seem to be doing so many other things. I mean, I applied to CIA. My dad worked with CIA. I was never against CIA. I thought only like dumb liberals were against CIA, and traitors or whatever. So my views on CIA have evolved based on things that I have seen and personally experienced.
You took a pretty well-publicized trip with your father. Was it about a year and a half ago? How long has it been?
Since we were in Pakistan.
Down in Nicaragua for the summer and work and, get involved in the war, and support the side that we thought was right.
Where you got left behind.
Oh, no, that was when I went to Vietnam with John McCain, and the hassle at the airport.
And are you still traveling with your father on trips?
We spent the summer in Nicaragua trying to get a sense of the war there, and all kinds of hilarity ensued, but
Yourself, my father's a great guy to travel with, and very amusing, and adventurous person who's up for anything. So I said, let's go to Pakistan. Okay.
And we have the internet to expose the lies. If this isn't 20 years ago when you were on CNN, and we couldn't expose things, we can expose it now, and they still do it.
Well, I guess I would ask myself, I lie. If I'm really cornered or something, I lie. I try never to lie on TV. I just don't, I don't like lying. I certainly do it, out of weakness or whatever.
Okay. So that's 2.5 minutes almost of Tucker Carlson over the course of 20 years talking about and getting caught at least in 2, maybe 3 explicit instances saying, my dad was in the CIA. We lived down the street from the CIA officer that overthrew Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. I went to Vietnam with John McCain. I traveled to Pakistan with my father. I traveled to Nicaragua with my friends at the behest of my father. All these different clips paint a very interesting picture. 25 years. Going back to 1999, Tucker is saying, I was traveling internationally with my dad, who was in this world, that Voice of America. And if you pay attention, he says in the Sean Ryan interview, he said, my dad ran Voice of America. That's what that is, the CIA. 2001, 2002, he says, my dad's at Voice of America. He's an ambassador from Seychelles, which is a major hub of the super mob, if you know anything about Seychelles. It's an island off the coast of Africa. And so I saw this compilation of clips, and I said, something's not right. This is clearly a deep mystery here. Obviously, I was onto something on my show last week. Then another clip came to light. A second clip, if you will, or a second theme. If these are a compilation of clips, there was another major clip that caught my attention. We watched it on Monday. I was going to do this show on Monday, but I had to do a little more research. And in this clip, the second clip that I want to play for you, Tucker Carlson attacks Patrick Buchanan. Now, for those that don't know, Patrick Buchanan was an advisor to the Republican presidents Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan in the 70s and in the 1980s. He became one of the most popular conservatives in America. He was a very famous commentator, pundit. He was on very popular talk shows. In 1990, he was in the middle of a major scandal because of his opposition to the war in Iraq. George H.W. Bush, former head of the CIA, vice president under Ronald Reagan, member of the Skull and Bones Society at Yale, George H.W. Bush took us to war in Iraq in 1990. Many people believe at the behest of the Israelis. This was after the neocon ascendancy of the 1970s and 1980s, which we'll get into. George H.W. Bush takes us to war against Israel's archenemy, Iraq. Patrick Buchanan, who was, again, a very famous columnist and pundit at the time, he ran afoul of many of the Jewish neocons and the conservative movement at large at the time. He said the only people that want a war in Iraq are the Israelis and their amen corner in Washington, who will agree with them on anything. For this, he was called an anti-Semite, He was canceled. He was banished from the conservative movement. He ran unsuccessfully for the presidency in 1992, 1996, and then again in 2000. Now, Patrick Buchanan was America First before America First. The title of this show. Patrick Buchanan was against the first war in Iraq before there were opponents of the second war in Iraq or opponents of the war in Iran. The situation in the 1990s, you could argue, was in many ways identical to what's happening in the conservative movement today. You had constituent elements of the conservative movement that were very skeptical of foreign intervention, very skeptical of going to war, particularly in the Middle East. At the same time, there were other factions inside the conservative movement that sought to cancel those people, who called them isolationists, anti-Semites, and undertook actions to get those people fired from their jobs, suppressed, get their careers destroyed, so that they could continue to advocate for wars in the Middle East that benefit Israel. Patrick Buchanan emerged as probably the leader of that former category of conservatives, of the social conservatives, the remnant of the old right in America that said after the end of the Cold War, why are we racing into the Middle East to fight another war for Israel? And for that, he was attacked. Now, this was a seminal moment because in many ways it prefigured the current arrangement. Just as it was then, so it is now. You have many constituent elements of the right wing that for one reason or another are coming out against the war in Syria, the war in Iran, calling for withdrawal from Iraq. And just as it was then, you have another element inside the right wing that is suppressing them, canceling them, trying to brand them as anti-Semites and isolationists. And just as it was then, you have a figure that has emerged, or a number of figures. I count myself among them. Perhaps you could say Tucker Carlson is one too, who are speaking out against the wars and against the neocons, this faction in the conservative movement that are pushing those wars. But 25 years ago, Tucker Carlson took a very aggressive line towards Pat Buchanan, the leader of America First in the 1990s. When all of the neocons, when others were attacking him, Tucker Carlson joined that chorus and called Pat Buchanan an anti-Semite and a nut. And his attack against Buchanan then is almost identical to his attack against me last week. I'll play that clip for you now. As I said, it's about 3 minutes, so bear with me. But it's important to watch the whole thing from start to finish.
I mean, this is part of the sad thing about Pat Buchanan, as far as I'm concerned. And just to restate, I mean, Pat does raise issues that I think are important. I mean, I think that, the sovereignty of the American military, et cetera. I mean, these are not just crank issues. But unfortunately, Pat Buchanan raises them in a way that I think is discredited. And when attacked, he can always fall back on the line, well, the tiny cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power. This is actually, incidentally, almost verbatim what he said the other day, that I offend the plutocracy, that I'm a wanted man by the inside the Beltway people, and in every sense cast himself as a victim who is sort of a Karen Silkwood of politics, someone who's so truthful that he's being hunted down by the conspiracy that runs Washington. I mean, it's all a bit much. Maybe Pat Buchanan just says things that are kind of kooky, and that's why he's being criticized. It's perfectly valid to question America's relationship with Israel. Israel has a lobby. It's perfectly fair, as far as I'm concerned, to beat up on Israel's lobby. But I don't think that's the reason that Buchanan is being labeled an anti-Semite. It's this kind of, as I've said, this relentless bringing up topics related to Judaism. I mean, famously, Pat, always beats up on Goldman Sachs, but never Morgan Stanley. I mean, it's really hard to. There is no point at which Pat Buchanan has held a press conference and said, I really don't like the Jews. I think they're a sinister force in America. But I think, and it took me years to come to this position. I mean, I'm not throwing the term anti-Semite around. But you reach a point when you say, well, gee, here's a guy who has gone out of his way to defend Demjanjuk and other accused Nazi war criminals, who's constantly attacked Israel, who's attacked American Jews for supporting Israel unduly, who's implied that American Jews push America into wars in which non-Jews die. There really is, and again, I'm not hysterical on this subject, but I do believe that there is a pattern with Pat Buchanan of needling the Jews. Is that anti-Semitic? Yeah. I mean, after a while, you conclude it is, in some sense, anti-Semitic. I mean, Pat Buchanan obviously has a lot of personal and affectionate relationships with people who are Jewish. So on a personal level, perhaps he's not, but on a different, maybe thematic level, I think he probably is. I think that people should be allowed to have differing views on immigration. I think people should be allowed to point out the fact that there is an Israeli lobby, and yes, it's powerful, and debate the merits of that, I guess. I don't think there's, strictly speaking, anything wrong with that. But again, I think Pat Buchanan is part of the reason it's so hard to have that conversation, because he discredits him by his presence, because he gives people who watch him carefully the sense that he has another agenda that has to do with personal dislike, and that he believes in conspiracies, and that he believes that the Jews are this sinister, secretly organized force trying to affect American politics. And those aren't discussions I think normal people, sober people should be having, because I think they're ludicrous.
Okay, so that's the clip. We're done with the clips for now, so I'm going to come back to our main screen here. So the basis of his attack against Patrick Buchanan is that Buchanan is an anti-Semite. And let's flesh this out a little bit. Let's tease this out somewhat. So Tucker says, because it's a very subtle and nuanced and specific thing that Tucker is saying. Tucker says that Pat Buchanan is kooky, is hateful. He's crazy, he's an anti-Semite, and because he's an anti-Semite, he's hurting legitimate political actors. How does Tucker Carlson create that distinction? What is the essence of that distinction between these so-called legitimate critics of the Israel lobby? Because if you notice, Tucker says it is okay to attack the Israel lobby. It is okay to talk about the sovereignty of our military. And sovereignty of the military means who is sending Americans to die in wars? Is it a foreign lobby, or is it actually the will of the American people? He said, so those are legitimate conversations to have. You can criticize the lobby. You can argue whether we're going to war at the behest of Israel or not. He said, and that's legitimate. That's a legitimate conversation that we can and should have. He said, but Pat Buchanan is different. He said, Pat Buchanan is kooky and crazy, and he is an anti-Semite. Why? What is the difference? Tucker says it is the insinuation that Jewish Americans support Israel because they are Jewish. That is the essence of the distinction. And in a sense, Tucker is acting as a gatekeeper. That is effectively a description of a gatekeeper. When Tucker is telling his audience, this is what you are allowed to talk about, and this is what you are not allowed to talk about, that is what he said. He said, these are the conversations you can and should have, and these are the conversations that sober-minded people should not be having. He is, in effect, by definition, a gatekeeper, because he controls the gate of acceptable discourse. What is tolerable, what is acceptable on television, in print, who can be employed and have a job influencing the minds of Americans, and who should not, who should be fired from their positions at various newspapers and opinion magazines, who should be fired from television, who should be listened to, who should have any credibility. Tucker is acting as a gatekeeper, controlling the gate of acceptable discourse, what is legitimate and what is crazy and hateful. And the basis of that distinction as the gatekeeper, again, is Pat says it has to do with Judaism. He is relentlessly talking about Judaism, and it is the Jewishness of the neocons which colors their bias in favor of Israel. Now, I want to read to you, this is an article from Ron Unz. Ron Unz is Jewish himself. He wrote a fantastic article about this. I would encourage everybody to read it. It is about the ascendancy of the neocons. Ron Unz writes a little summary of the situation that Tucker Carlson is referring to. Tucker says that Pat is an anti-Semite. That is based on a couple of specific quotes that Pat Buchanan made in the early 1990s. Again, and the build-up to this is that George Bush took the country to war in Iraq in 1990, and it was a coalition of what were called paleo-conservatives, Pat Buchanan among them, as well as Russell Kirk and Joseph Sobran and Sam Francis, that were in opposition to the war. So this is the summary. This is from Ron Unz. This will help give you an idea of what was happening at the time and how and why Tucker was weighing in almost 10 years later. It says, quote, this is from the Unz Review. Many leading traditional conservatives expressed very strong reservations about George Bush's Gulf War plans, while the neocons fervently supported the attack against Israel's most dangerous regional rival, Iraq. Pat Buchanan held important positions in both the Nixon and Reagan administrations, and then he was a nationally syndicated columnist with a huge television footprint on Crossfire, the McLaughlin Group, and other popular cable shows. The ADL and other Jewish groups ferociously attacked the pundit when he declared to his national television audience of millions, quote, this is Patrick Buchanan, Capitol Hill is Israeli-occupied territory. This is 35 years ago. Pat Buchanan. There are only two groups that are beating the drums for war in the Middle East: the Israeli Defense Ministry and its Amen Corner in the United States. The Israelis want this war desperately because they want the United States to destroy the Iraqi war machine. They want us to finish them off. They don't care about our relations with the Arab world. This was in 1990. This is Pat Buchanan in 1990 against the first Bush administration in the first Persian Gulf War, which happened on the Iraqi side of the Persian Gulf. Notice how prescient what he said was then, 35 years ago. That was before 9/11, before the war in Iraq, the invasion and overthrow of Saddam Hussein in 2003, before the global war on terror, before all of it, before social media. Pat Buchanan said Capitol Hill is Israeli-occupied territory. The only people that want the war, the Israeli Defense Ministry, and notably he says the Israeli Defense Ministry's Amen Corner meaning amen, people that will support the Israelis no matter what in Washington. This comment was singled out and became a national controversy. And many of the neocons, both Jews and non-Jews alike, said that when Pat Buchanan said Amen Corner, he meant Jews. Pat Buchanan was insinuating, according to the neocons, that all the Jews in Washington were supporting Israel's war, imputing their motivations, saying that American Jews are Israel first. Imagine that. The article goes on. It says some commentators contended that that latter phrase could be read to mean merely Israel's supporters. But this more benign interpretation was undermined by some of Buchanan's own columns. In one column, written within days of the Amen Corner remark, Buchanan named 4 of those that he had in mind, the Amen Corner. A.M. Rosenthal, the former Assistant Secretary of Defense Richard Pearl, the columnist Charles Krauthammer, and the former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. The Jewishness of these names contrasted with those of the American soldiers, who, in a subsequent piece, Buchanan said would do the fighting if war came to the Gulf. He said kids with names like McAllister, Murphy, Gonzalez, and Leroy Brown will die in the war in Iraq. So, Buchanan says one day, this war is the doing of the Israeli Defense Ministry. They want America to do our bidding, and they own Capitol Hill, and the only ones that want this war in Iraq are the Israeli government and their supporters in America. Everybody says, well, what's the Amen Corner? That's a dog whistle for American Jews. Some people say, no, he didn't mean American Jews. He just meant like neocons in general, people that support Israel. Buchanan comes over a week later and says, no, when I'm referring to the Amen Corner, I mean these 4 Jews. I mean these Jewish writers and these Jewish guys that work at think tanks and the Jewish people inside the Defense Department. Those are the Amen Corner. Those are the only other people in addition to Israel that support the war. And Buchanan contrasted those names. He said, who supports Israel's war in Iraq? Rosenthal, Krauthammer, Pearl, and Kissinger, all Jews. He said, and who's going to die in the war? He said, Leroy Brown, McAllister, Murphy, and Gonzalez. Now, what's the implication? The implication is these Jews in America that love Israel because they're Jewish, they're pushing us into a war that benefits Israel that Americans will die in. Specifically, non-Jewish Americans that are Irish, that are white from Appalachia, that are Mexican. People with names like McAllister, Gonzalez, and Leroy Brown, they're going to die for people named Rosenthal, Kissinger, and Krauthammer. That was the comment in the early 1990s that got him attacked by the establishment, those are the comments that Tucker Carlson was referring to. When Tucker says that Pat Buchanan is insinuating that Jews push America into wars that non-Jews are going to die in, that's the remark he was talking about. The Amen Corner, that's the remark he was talking about. And to Tucker, that is the line between what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. Whether you say that Jewishness and Judaism has anything to do with the neoconservatives in America, the Israel lobby in America, and Israel bringing us to war in the Middle East for their benefit. The distinction is whether you think it's all ideological or whether you think it has to do with their Jewishness, whether it's essential. That's the distinction. Now, the article from UNS goes on. It says, Pat Buchanan decided to challenge George Bush in the Republican primaries, a development that seemed likely to spark an explosive public conflict between the heavily Jewish neocons and their traditionalist conservative rivals, very much like what is happening today. William F. Buckley Jr., who was the founder of National Review, had long reigned as the quasi-pope of the conservatives. He attempted to preempt this looming conflict by publishing a book called In Search of Anti-Semitism, a massive 40,000-word article that filled an entire issue of his magazine, National Review, and was later released as a book, coming down on the side of the neocons and sharply criticizing his erstwhile allies like Buchanan and Sobran. So this was the episode, think about it, this was the episode in the 1990s. George H.W. Bush, again, from Yale College, from Skull and Bones, George Bush, the vice president from Yale, from the CIA, who became the president, brought us to war in Iraq at the behest of the neocons. Pat Buchanan, Joseph Sobran, Sam Francis, Russell Kirk, the traditional conservatives rise up and say, this is not America first. This is a war for Israel. Capitol Hill is Israeli-occupied territory, and so is the conservative movement. And the reason they're supporting the war is because they're Jewish. Pat Buchanan challenges the incumbent president, George Bush, in 1992 in the Republican primary and almost wins in New Hampshire. Gets a surprising amount of support and threatens to fracture the movement by serving as a spoiler in that GOP primary in 1992. Buchanan inspires Ross Perot to run as a third party. And some people blame Pat Buchanan and Ross Perot for George Bush's defeat in 1992. Does this sound similar? 8 years later, Tucker Carlson comes out and says what? It's okay to criticize neocons and their wars. It's okay to criticize the Israel lobby. It's okay to talk about the sovereignty of the military. He said what's beyond the pale is this insistence on talking about Judaism, saying that Jewish Americans have to support Israel, saying that non-Jews will die in wars that Jewish push America into. He said that is what is truly anti-Semitic. That is beyond the pale. This mirrors exactly the situation right now, which is that the Israel lobby, once again, is pushing us into a war in Iran. Who is Donald Trump's vice president right now? J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, who went to Yale Law School, who is a protege of Peter Thiel, one of the CIA's most important contractors because he built Palantir. And as we talked about last week, J.D. Vance would not exist, would not have had a Senate seat, would not be Trump's vice president without Peter Thiel and actually Tucker Carlson. So just as then, George Bush, head of the CIA from Yale, vice president under Reagan, becomes president, puts us to war in Iraq, as it is now. J.D. Vance, protege of CIA contractor Peter Thiel from Yale Law School. Trump is pushing us into war with Iran at the behest of the neocons. I get up in 2024 and say, do not vote for Trump. This is Israeli-occupied territory. The only people that want a war in Iran are the Israelis in their Amen corner. And just as in 1999, what does Tucker Carlson come out and say about me? He said, there are legitimate critics of the neocons like Joe Kent and Vance. But Fuentes is crazy and hateful. He is kooky and an anti-Semite. It's the same situation 30 years ago over a different war and the same monologue, canceling what is really the same figure, relatively the same figure in exactly the same way. As I said at the beginning of the show, this is a story of generations. This story, like all stories, is a story of generations, fathers and sons, and cycles and networks, and the rise and fall of nations. So you could say that in the 1990s, there was a different generation of this battle. There were the paleocons and the neocons, just as there are now. Paleocons, America Firsters, and neocons. But I want to focus a little bit more on William F. Buckley, because as Ron Unz writes in his article, the major attack against Pat Buchanan did not come from Tucker Carlson. At that time, Tucker Carlson was a very low-level journalist, barely got on television, and was not really into public broadcasting. And his attack on Buchanan came in 1999, many years after the initial controversy in 1991. The major attack against Buchanan came from William F. Buckley, who at that time, if you understand anything about the history of the conservative movement, William F. Buckley was considered the intellectual leader of the conservative movement in America. Ron Unz calls him the quasi-pope. And it was William F. Buckley who founded National Review in the 1950s, at the beginning of the Cold War, after World War II. It was William F. Buckley that throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, he is the one that really created the modern doctrine of conservatism. He was behind Barry Goldwater in 1964. He was the intellectual heavyweight behind the fusionist coalition that brought Reagan to power in 1980. So William F. Buckley was the leader of the conservatives, in many ways similar to Tucker Carlson today, or you could argue somebody like Ben Shapiro or somebody like Charlie Kirk. William F. Buckley was dominant. I would argue more dominant than any of them today back in the 1980s and 1990s. As I said, William F. Buckley wrote a 40,000-word hit piece on Buchanan in 1991 called In Search of Anti-Semitism, filled up a whole issue of the magazine, published as a book, and it sought to cancel Pat Buchanan and push him out of the race so that he could not challenge George Bush in 1992. Now, I want to talk about who William F. Buckley is, because when we work through the biography of William F. Buckley, we're going to discover some startling themes, some startling patterns. And you'll notice there's many of these patterns that show up over and over and over again in consistent themes. Before we get into William F. Buckley, it is important to talk about the CIA and where the CIA came from and how the CIA operates, what its mission is, among other things. Because again, if you go back to last week, my criticism of Tucker Carlson, the central question is Tucker Carlson in the CIA? We talked about his father. We talked about Voice of America. He accused me of being in the CIA. He attacked Pat Buchanan along the same lines that William F. Buckley did 10 years earlier. I want to talk about the CIA and establish some important things to understand about how they operate first, to understand all these stories. So where did the CIA actually come from? The CIA is established in 1947, but it was preceded by an organization called the OSS. And this was a wartime intelligence organization that was started during World War II in the aftermath of some sabotage attacks in New York City and other espionage that was happening during the war on the part of the Germans and the Axis powers that we were fighting. So the OSS forms up. That's the precursor to the CIA. It's a wartime intelligence outfit. Now, we're not going to go into all the particulars and details. There's a couple of things we need to understand about the CIA during World War II and shortly afterward at the beginning of the Cold War. In the first place, some of the most important sources, confidential sources that provided human intelligence for the OSS during World War II came through Italy. The United States invades Italy in 1943. They take over the Italian peninsula, and this is like their springboard into the European continent to fight Hitler and to fight the European Axis powers. The OSS rapidly establishes themselves inside of Italy. And one of the biggest sources of intelligence during the war for the OSS was Jewish refugees that fled Nazi-occupied territory through Italy. The Nazis occupied a vast swath of territory in Germany, in Austria, all over Northern Europe, where a lot of Jews lived. And when the Jews were fleeing Nazi captivity or persecution, they fled to Italy, where they were not going to be subjected to some of the anti-Semitic policies, and ultimately where they were liberated by the United States when the U.S. invaded and landed there. Now, the Jewish refugees fled Germany and Austria into Italy, and they provided a massive source of confidential intelligence for U.S. wartime intelligence. And you have to understand why that is. Those Jewish refugees had information about Germany, about Austria. What's more, they spoke the language. They spoke German. They spoke the lingua franca of the Nazi Empire. Also, they were hostile to the Nazi Empire, being Jews. So these Jews that were leaving Nazi Germany, these are like ready-made intelligence units, because they hate the enemy, they speak the enemy's language, and they used to live on the enemy's territory. So very quickly, in the 1940s, U.S. wartime intelligence is using these Jewish refugees to get information on the Nazis. They're using Jewish refugees as intelligence agents, penetrating Nazi Germany along the border. The person that ran this intelligence operation was a guy named James Jesus Angleton. He was in charge of all of the OSS operations on the Italian peninsula, and he got in charge a little bit later, but he got there in 1943 with the rest of the Allies. And it was Angleton who was running this operation. And Angleton saw the value of these Jewish refugees as intelligence officers. They were a great asset for what would become the CIA. This is important to understand. Now, later on, of course, the Allies win World War II. We defeat Nazi Germany. And in the next 5 years after the war is won, the United States enters a Cold War with the Soviet Union. And all of a sudden, the Soviet Union becomes the primary adversary. 1947, the OSS becomes the CIA. James Angleton becomes one of the founding fathers of the CIA. And he is put in charge of being a liaison between U.S. intelligence and foreign intelligence agencies. 1948, the State of Israel is declared. They declare their independence. They fight a brief war with the Arabs. The U.S. recognizes them. And James Angleton begins liaising with Israeli intelligence as part of his job description, founding father of the CIA, running counterintelligence, and working as a liaison with our allied intel agencies. Pursuant to the emerging Cold War, the Soviet Union became our primary adversary. But there was a big problem. An Iron Curtain had descended onto Europe. The Soviets were not letting anybody leave the Soviet Union, or later on, the Warsaw Pact countries. The Soviet Union was a closed-off society. Joseph Stalin made it like a fortress. And so, in the early days of the CIA, in the early days of the Cold War, we had no knowledge of what was happening inside the Soviet Union. We had no human intelligence, no sources that were inside of Russia, and Stalin had created this impenetrable fortress. There was no way to get in. That is until the 1950s. During the 1950s, there was a major aliyah. An aliyah is when the Jewish people leave their country from the diaspora and go to Israel. There's been many waves of aliyahs over the years. I think there's 6 or 7 major aliyahs. This is when a Jew makes their pilgrimage, they leave, and they return to the Holy Land to reside in Israel. In the 1950s, there was a major aliyah of Jews. Russia had a massive Jewish population. They left the Soviet Union and went to Israel. James Angleton understood the value of Jewish refugees as an intelligence source. Just as in Italy during World War II, Austrian and German Jews were very helpful human sources to tell us secrets about Nazi Germany, and they spoke the language and they carried out operations and they knew about those countries in which they resided. Angleton, now running the foreign desk at the newly created CIA, he saw the value in Jewish refugees that left the Soviet Union and went to Israel. And so James Angleton began a working relationship with the Israeli intelligence agencies like Shin Bet and Mossad. And a quid pro quo relationship was established. Israel understood, just like Angleton did, the value of the intelligence that the Jews leaving Russia had for the United States. And Israel was not going to give that intelligence away for free. As the Jewish refugees left Russia and came into Israel, the Israeli intelligence agencies like Shin Bet would pick them up off the street and interview them. They would gather all the information and put them under confidence. They would gather all the information that the Russian Jewish refugees had, and they would go to their liaison from the CIA, James Angleton, and they would offer him a deal. The Israeli intelligence agencies would say, if you give us American intelligence on our adversaries, like Egypt and Syria, if you give us intelligence on nuclear weapons, then we will give you the intelligence from our Jewish refugees that left Russia. That was the quid pro quo relationship that went from the 1950s until Angleton left the Israel desk in the early 1970s. So from the very beginning, from the 40s during the time of the OSS in World War II, through to the beginning and the height of the Cold War and the time of the CIA, you have to understand that U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence, in particular Jewish refugees, were inextricably connected. So much so, many people talk about the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the role of the CIA in it. People point to James Angleton. James Angleton managed a team of hundreds of people with a black budget. Many of them oversaw the handling of John F. Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. The people that opened Lee Harvey Oswald's mail and read it, the people that met with him in real life, they were Jewish. They were Jewish refugees from Russia. And they were a part of Angleton's hand-picked team working with a black budget, liaising with the state of Israel. The CIA and Israeli intelligence from the jump were intertwined like this. And the reason for this is not hard to understand. This is another thing to comprehend about the CIA before we get into William F. Buckley. James Jesus Angleton was not Jewish. He was American. He came from Idaho. And you might say, was he Jewish? Was he secretly Jewish? What was the motivation? It was pretty simple. James Angleton was a virulent and fierce anti-communist. He would do anything to fight the Soviet Union. And in the 1950s, when we had no idea what was happening in Russia, he would do anything to get his hands on intelligence about Russia and about the Soviet Union, even if it meant working with the Israelis, even if it meant giving the Israelis classified information about nuclear weapons. What's more, James Angleton saw Israel as an ally against the Soviet Union in the Middle East. After 1955, Egypt and Syria were armed by the Soviet Union. They received weapons, tanks, planes, and over the 50s, 60s, and 70s, moved further and further into the orbit of the Soviet Union. And on the great chessboard of communism versus capitalism during the Cold War, the CIA and the Defense Department, all these different anti-communists, they saw Israel as a bulwark against Soviet communist influence in the Middle East. So that was the basis of their cooperation. Just like in World War II, they wanted to defeat the Nazis so that the United States could liberate Europe. During the Cold War, they wanted to defeat the Soviet Union. That's why they backed Israel and used Jews as an intelligence agency, effectively. Something else was created in the 1950s. This is the last thing we need to establish about the CIA before we get into William F. Buckley. What the CIA was really worried about in the 1950s was the ideological battle that the communists were waging on America. Because in addition to the Cold War being an arms race, a space race, being fought in proxy wars in Asia, Latin America, and in the Middle East, it was also an ideological battle. And in the same way that the Soviet Union was providing weapons and building nuclear weapons and doing all of these conventional or non-conventional military activities, the Soviet Union was also supporting an international communist element. They were backing communist political parties. They were backing communist book clubs, campus organizations, backing communist intellectuals. And if you know anything about the Red Scare, which happened in the 20s and then again in the 50s, and really was in place throughout the duration of the existence of the Soviet Union, the US government and CIA, first the FBI, then the CIA, were very concerned about communist and Soviet penetration of American society through the use of spies, double agents, pushing communist ideology. So just like the Soviets, the CIA also engaged in an information ideological war. The Soviets gave weapons, the CIA gave weapons. The Soviets fought proxy wars, so did the CIA. The Soviets developed a space program for the purpose of missiles, so did the CIA with Project Paperclip. And just like the Soviet Union had communist ideological allies all across the world, so did the CIA. In the 1950s, the CIA backed a program called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And I'll read this blurb about it. This is from Wikipedia. It says, in 1950, a group of intellectuals founded an organization called the Congress for Cultural Freedom with the aim of consolidating an anti-totalitarian intellectual community around the globe. The CCF's connections with the United States CIA were definitively established 16 and 17 years later in reports by the New York Times and Ramparts magazine, respectively. They claimed that the CIA, operating through a series of dummy foundations, had been instrumental in organizing and funding the CCF. Two people who were critical at the very beginning, and this will be important later, are Irving Kristol and James Burnham. They were both there in Berlin, in West Germany, at the founding of the CCF. Congress for Cultural Freedom in the 50s and 60s claimed to be an organization of pro-freedom intellectuals, many of them liberal. Many of them were left-wing or center-left liberal. And the claim of the Congress for Cultural Freedom is that they were leftists or liberals against radicalism, against communism. Some of them were even Trotskyites, but they were against Stalinism and against the Soviet Union. Some of the biggest names in the conservative movement in the 50s and 60s. Some of the biggest magazines with the conservative or even liberal ideological orientation in the 50s and 60s received money from the Congress for Cultural Freedoms. Many names you'd recognize were involved with this group. And throughout those 2 decades, nobody knew that the entire time this outfit, which was providing seed money for magazines, radio stations, TV stations, books, book clubs, you name it, it was receiving money from the CIA the entire time. Many of the constituent projects did not even know about the connection. The Congress would provide money for a small magazine. They'd provide a grant for an intellectual. And the recipients of these grants themselves, in some cases, did not even know that ultimately the money came from the CIA. That was revealed many years later. So this is important to understand about how intelligence in America operates. Again, World War II and the Cold War, they're relying upon Jewish refugees. They see Israel as a bulwark against communism. The CIA, even the elements that are not Jewish, or even necessarily sympathetic to Israel because it is Jewish, they were very pro-Jewish because of what they believed they could gain in their fight against the Soviet Union with the organized Jewish community in the world and with the state of Israel. And aside from that, the CIA is fighting an ideological battle against totalitarianism, against Stalinism. And so they're backing a lot of conservative intellectuals, liberal and conservative, that are saying, you know, even if they're not conservative, they're against radicalism. They're against the turn of the American left to full-fledged socialism and communism. And that is so that they could fortify American democracy and democracy even in Europe. Now we got to get into William F. Buckley, understanding these things. So William F. Buckley is the head of National Review, criticizing Patrick Buchanan in 1991. But where does William F. Buckley come from? I'll read to you a little bit from his bio. William F. Buckley enrolled at Yale University after World War II. Very important that he was from Yale. He joined the Skull and Bones Secret Society. If you recall, so did George H.W. Bush about a year before he did, and so did other prominent people too. He edited the Yale Daily News, a student newspaper. In 1951, he was recruited into the CIA and worked with E. Howard Hunt in Mexico City, where his father had an oil company. While with the CIA, he published a book called God and Man at Yale, The Superstitions of Academic Freedom. Later, he left the CIA and became editor of the American Mercury. He continued to be active in right-wing politics. In 1953, he established the Intercollegiate Society of Individualists. So he's at Yale University after the war. He's recruited by one of his professors into the CIA. He allegedly leaves the CIA, and then he forms up this group called ISI, Intercollegiate Society of Individuals, which was created to counter a group of the same acronym of a similar name that was formed up by communists to support socialism. Then, in 1955, he hits his big break. He founds National Review with Leo Buzzell. The early senior cadres of the journal included Yale professor Wilmore Kendall, who, as the chief CIA recruiter at Yale, was responsible for recruiting William F. Buckley into the CIA. It also included James Burnham, who was working for the OSS during World War II and was active in the Congress for Cultural Freedom. He was also reputed to have had a hand in the successful plan to overthrow Iran's Mossadegh and install the Shah in 1953. Also on the original board was William Rusher, formerly a hard-right captain in Army military intelligence. Marvin Lieberman met William F. Buckley in the 1950s and also helped to found the National Review. He was active in CIA projects internationally, including the Committee for a Free Asia, the World Anti-Communist League, and the American Chilean Council. Another OSS officer, William Casey, drew up the legal documents for the National Review. So William F. Buckley is at Yale. He gets recruited to the CIA by his professor, Wilmore Kendall. Then, after allegedly leaving the CIA, he forms up a Society for Free Market Individualists, a campus group, then starts up the National Review with no fewer than 5 former OSS or former CIA officers, including his professor that recruited him into the CIA, who was the head recruiter of the CIA at Yale, including James Burnham, who was at the founding of the Congress for Cultural Freedom. So it is obvious from the very beginning that William F. Buckley has a very similar story to Tucker Carlson. He's at an Ivy League university in New England, like Tucker Carlson. He's recruited by a professor to form up a student newspaper, write a conservative book against the communists, and to start up National Review, a publication that he had the help in founding with 5 other CIA officers, including ones that were involved in the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was providing grants and money on behalf of the CIA to anti-communist projects. This is William F. Buckley. But he wasn't the only one to attack Patrick Buchanan. What is the basis of attacking Patrick Buchanan in the 1990s? Tucker Carlson then, just like now, and even William F. Buckley too, they said the problem with Pat Buchanan is that there is a legitimate fight against certain neocons. William F. Buckley eventually endorsed Pat Buchanan. Tucker Carlson considers himself an adversary of the neocons. They said the problem with Pat Buchanan and people like me is not that we're working for the neocons. It's not that we're the enemy. The subtle critique by Buckley and Carlson, 2 creatures of the CIA, is that both of us are hurting the real battle against the neocons. And they take issue with the fact that me and Pat Buchanan did not treat this as an ideological phenomenon, but as a Jewish phenomenon, as an ethnic or religious phenomenon. It's important to establish now who the neocons even are. If that is the battle between the America Firsters and the neocons, if we can all agree on that, but there is a battle within America First about who's really fighting the neocons, and we look at who's on either side of that battle, It's William F. Buckley and Tucker Carlson against Pat Buchanan and Nick Fuentes. It's Buckley at Yale, recruited in the CIA, founded National Review with the CIA, Tucker Carlson with his dad running Voice of America, against Pat Buchanan and Nick Fuentes, the cranks, the crazies, the anti-Semites. Well, it might help elucidate who the real enemy of the neocons are to take a look at the neocons themselves. This is a blurb from Ron Unz talking about the neocons from the same article as before. It says, quote, "The term neoconservative had originally appeared in the early 1970s, applied by critics to a small group of social scientists and other intellectuals who had rejected the radicalism of the 1960s and gravitated towards more moderate positions. In 1965, Irving Kristol co-founded The Public Interest, a semi-academic quarterly journal focused on matters of social policy. Many of these individuals were Jews originally from New York City, often with deep personal roots in the non-Stalinist left, including Trotskyites. Also around that time, Commentary magazine, edited by Norman Podhoretz and based in the same city, New York, moved in a similar direction, replacing its enthusiasm for the radical new left with sharp criticism, becoming the leading American publication associated with the early neoconservative movement. In those pre-internet days, professionally produced print publications with a national circulation were an extremely scarce intellectual resource, and as such, could serve as the focal point for a nascent ideological movement. Okay? This is an important point to understand. In the 2020s, how do people get their ideas and information? We get it from social media. 15, 20, 30 years ago, how did people get their information? Cable news, television. But in those days, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the policymakers, the politicians, the intellectuals, they were influenced by intellectual magazines. Now, even if the magazines did not have a huge readership, even if they were not read by millions of people or even hundreds of thousands of people, even if they were read by a small audience, it matters who that audience was. And in those days, that audience was the opinion makers, the taste makers, the policy makers, the intelligentsia. So what Unz is talking about, and this is critical to understand the influence of the neocons, is that the Congress for Cultural Freedom with the CIA is funding all these small magazines. And you might not understand the significance of it, but these small magazines, these radio stations, these international television programs, like we talked about last week, as Dick Carlson himself said, this is the lifeblood. This is the bread and butter of political movements, domestically and internationally. This is the intellectual juice behind them. This influences them. So the article says, in the pre-internet days, it is these professional publications, which were scarce, the national circulation professional publications, that would be the focal point for an ideological movement. And that's how the neoconservatives got started. It says, but Commentary, one such magazine, again edited by Norman Podhoretz, was also the flagship publication of the American Jewish Committee. And Podhoretz himself deeply identified with Jewish issues. Those factors impacted his editorial line, which naturally included a major focus upon Israel and the Middle East along the plight of Soviet Jewry. Partly for such reasons, a hawkish foreign policy, including heavy emphasis on the Cold War, became important neocon concerns. So think about how this develops. We got to back up and talk about the history again. So in the 1950s, we are in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. And very quickly it becomes clear that Jews are going to be the intermediary between the Soviet Union and the United States. It is going to be Jews, Jewish spies, Jewish double agents. They act as the mediators. They're conducting arbitrage between the Soviets and the Americans. I'll give you a few examples. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonates an atomic bomb. How did the Soviet Union get the bomb when the Americans developed it in secrecy? How did the Soviets get it before the British, before the French? They got it through Jewish spies, like Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were Jewish communists in America that passed the secrets to Soviet spies. In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev, the general secretary who succeeded Joseph Stalin after his death in 1953, Khrushchev gave a famous speech in 1956, de-Stalinizing the Communist Party. For the first time ever, he destroyed the cult of personality around Stalin by criticizing the excesses of the purges and other policies like the 5-year plans that Stalin inflicted on Russia. It was so secretive, it was called the secret speech, and it was only delivered to the Communist Party. But the United States got their hands on it. How? Because of Jewish refugees that left the Soviet Union, gave it to Shin Bet, the Israeli intelligence agency, who gave it to the CIA. So how did the Soviets get the bomb? Jewish spies. How did the Americans get the secret speech? Jewish spies. If the United States is fighting a spy war, an intelligence war with the Soviet Union, Jews are going to be a very big part of that. And why is that? Because Jews live in Russia, Jews live in the United States. They live in Germany, they live in France, they live in the United Kingdom, they live in Italy. And they don't have allegiance to their home countries. They might have allegiance to Israel. They might have ideological affinity with communism. They might have ideological affinity with capitalism. But because they're not, strictly speaking, American or Russian by ethnicity, or Italian or French, because they are stateless, they become free agents. And they could pick sides depending on their ideology, depending on their ideals. So an American Jew could be an ideological communist in their heart and betray America. A Russian Jew could be born in Russia but betray the Soviet Union because they're American in their heart. They're capitalist in their heart. Because they flee to Israel and they want to support Israel. Okay? So during the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, you have Americans that are engaged in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. But American Jewry, Russian Jewry, and Israel are somewhere in the middle. Now, the Americans are fighting with the Russians in Cuba, in Korea, in Vietnam. We're in the middle of an arms race, a space race. And for those that don't know, the space race is really an arms race. Because when we're building rockets that are ostensibly supposed to do satellites and go to the moon, they also have a dual use, which is as intercontinental ballistic missiles. So in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Americans are going crazy. The American leadership is going crazy because we're saying, how do we defeat this enemy? They seem to be everywhere. These countries are falling like dominoes. And the Soviets have a bigger conventional force in Europe. They have a bigger nuclear arsenal. They might have the advantage. This is what's happening in America. And so the Americans are funding these magazines to stall and to forestall communist influence in Europe and the United States. But there's something happening at the same time, which is that Israel is fighting a war for independence. Israel declares its independence in 1948. They fight a war with Egypt and Syria. Jewish organized crime in America runs guns illegally to Israel, which helps Israel decisively defeat a coalition of Egypt and Syria in the war. And an unsteady peace breaks out. In 1955, Israel does a major raid on Gaza and kills 35 Egyptians. Egypt is not receiving arms from the United States and Europe, but Israel is. So what does Egypt do? President Nasser turns to the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union begins supplying weapons to Israel's enemies, Egypt and Syria. In 1956, Israel goes to war with Egypt. Throughout the 50s and 60s, Israel's at war with its neighbors, with the Palestinians, with terrorist groups. Israel is fighting for its very survival. And as time goes on, Egypt and Syria and all the other Muslim countries are moving closer to the Soviet Union, and Israel is moving closer to the United States. By the mid-1960s, when Lyndon Johnson is installed in the United States, we start pouring weapons into Israel. Whereas up until 1963, we were not giving Israel a lot of weapons, and that was in the pursuit of balance between Israel and the Arabs. All of a sudden, we were giving them tons of guns. And we really made the decision that Israel was going to be our country. They were going to be our bulwark against communism in the Middle East. Something very important happens in 1967. In 1967, Israel sees an opportunity to strike a crushing blow on Egypt and Syria, its prime adversaries, its most powerful adversaries on its southern and northern border. In the Six-Day War, Israel flies into Egypt and destroys its air force. Then Israel flies into Syria and destroys its air force. With total air superiority, Israel invades Gaza, Israel invades the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and then Israel in the north takes the Golan Heights and nearly sieges Damascus in the north inside of Syria. And in 6 days, the war is over. Israel is bigger than ever. It now occupies not just the entire Mandate of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza, but it also occupies the Sinai and the Golan Heights. Israel is massive. Now, in response to this sneak attack, the Soviet Union begins giving more support to Egypt and Syria. The left wing in America, the American political left, has a harsh reaction. They view the Israeli war as aggression, as provocative. They view it as an occupation of these third world countries. And so the American political left and the Soviet Union turn against Israel. In 1973, Egypt and Syria have their revenge. They launch a surprise attack on Israel. Egypt invades the Sinai Peninsula from the Suez Canal. Syria invades the Golan simultaneously. Israel is caught totally off guard. They're almost overrun and defeated. They come very close to the brink of annihilation. The United States initially is reluctant to bail them out. Israel threatens to use nuclear weapons. The Prime Minister of Israel at the time, Golda Meir, calls up Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger and says, if you don't give us support, if you don't bail us out, we will have to take extraordinary measures, implying nuclear weapons. And they begin taking their nuclear warheads and putting them in public view of satellite imagery to send the message to Nixon and Kissinger. Nixon and Kissinger bail out Israel with a massive airlift of weapons. And there's a very contentious period of negotiations between the Americans and the Soviets, the Israelis and the Egyptians, but eventually the war is settled. In 1975, the Soviet Union goes to the United Nations and they pass a resolution saying that Zionism is racism. The Soviet Union is now fully against Israel. And they're against Israel because they're backing Syria, they're backing Egypt, which Israel has just invaded, attacked, at war with, violating the terms of the ceasefire. The Soviet Union is backing Israel's enemies and passing resolutions in the UN objecting to Zionism itself. And the Soviet Union's allies in America, the American political left, is also decidedly against Israel. They say that Israel's colonizers, racists. They take the side of the Egyptians and the Syrians. And this is where many of the Jewish left-wingers that were supported by the Congress for Cultural Freedom in the 50s and 60s. Now remember, they themselves were communists. They were from New York. They were liberals. They were leftists. Remember, the purpose of the Congress for Cultural Freedom was to beat back the ideological influence of the Soviet Union by steering the left away from communism and Stalinism and towards a more moderate form of left-wing politics. And many of those intellectuals were part of a Jewish New York intellectual scene in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. All these guys were left-wingers. And the neocons, like Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz, they were left-wing too. But when they saw the American political left's reaction to 67 and 73, when they saw the Soviet Union's resolution at the UN, when they saw the Soviet Union go firmly behind Egypt and Syria, that is when the Jewish neocons flipped. And this is what they had to say about it. These are the two preeminent neocons, Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz. Irving Kristol, in a Wall Street Journal essay titled Notes on Yom Kippur, said that he admitted to a Jewish instinct for impending disaster. He wrote, "I care desperately. I sense deep down that what happens to Israel will be decisive for Jewish history and for the kinds of lives my grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be leading. In such a war, not only is the whole of the Jewish past at stake, but also the whole of the Jewish future. That's Irving Kristol, the godfather of neoconservatism. That's Irving Kristol, the godfather of neoconservatism, who founded what was at the time the most influential neocon magazine in the 1960s, which is The Public Interest. He said in his notes on the Yom Kippur War that the whole of Jewish history is at stake. He sensed it. Norm Podhoretz, who founded Commentary Magazine, which is arguably the second or first most influential neocon magazine after Public Interest, Norman Podhoretz had this to say about the 1975 resolution by the Soviet Union. He said, quote, "The resolution did not merely condemn the state of Israel for alleged crimes against the Palestinians or for discriminating against its own Arab citizens. What the resolution did was to denounce the state of Israel itself as an illegitimate entity. The very idea of a sovereign Jewish state in the Middle East, let alone the actuality of one, no matter what its boundaries might be, was by definition declared criminal. In the eyes of this resolution, Israel could only cease to be criminal if it ceased to be both Jewish and sovereign. If, in other words, it ceased to exist." Returning to the boundaries of 1967 or even the boundaries of 1948 would make not the slightest difference, for the resolution did not concern boundaries or occupied territories. It concerned the right of a sovereign Jewish state of any size or shape to exist in the Middle East. In a profile of Podhoretz, it said, quote, "He felt deeply betrayed by the American left, and not to mention the Europeans, who became critical of the Jewish state after the 1967 war, and even more so after the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Podhoretz later wrote that after the war, he would direct commentary to become more aggressive than it had ever been before in defending Jewish interests, both at home and abroad." So, you have these Jewish leftists in New York. They're being funded by the CIA. These Jewish intellectual leftists, they're being funded by the CIA to curb the radical tendencies, the Stalinist, Soviet sympathetic tendencies of the American left wing. And they're working hand in glove with the CIA, who's also against the Soviet Union. But as Israel progresses in its own story, Israel finds itself at odds, in peril, with its Soviet-backed neighbors. And in a series of wars, starting in 67, leading into 73, American Jewish leftists realize the Soviet Union is really the enemy. Because the Soviet Union and the American left, if they had it their way, they would make it so that Israel doesn't exist. The Soviets are backing Israel's enemies, and the American left is backing the Soviets' claim that Israel has no right to exist. And so the two preeminent neocons, they would become the preeminent leaders of the neoconservative movement, Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz, they are liberals, they are leftists. They say, we are no longer of the left. We feel betrayed. We are no longer supporting the European left. We feel betrayed by Europe, by the American left wing, to some extent by our fellow liberals, leftists, even communists. Because they have no sympathy for Israel as Israel is being destroyed. And this is why they turn to the right. This is from PBS. It says, quote, "The neoconservatives were mostly former leftists who deserted George McGovern's Democratic Party in protest against its opposition to the war in Vietnam. While it was true that many neocons were Jewish, so too was the Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. The turning point for them came in 1973 with Israel's near defeat at the hands of the Arabs. It was Kissinger himself who observed in his memoirs that the Yom Kippur War, quote, completed the neocons' conversion to geopolitical realities. Henceforth, they agitated in favor of a U.S. foreign policy that melded fervent anti-communism with uncompromising support for Israel." Now, I want to get into their biographies. That is what made them neoconservatives. What did they do as neoconservatives? This is the New York Times on Irving Kristol. It says, quote, Mr. Crystal exerted an influence across generations, from William F. Buckley to the columnist David Brooks. Through a variety of positions he held over a long career, including executive vice president of Basic Books, the contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He was commonly known as the godfather of neoconservatism. In probably his most widely quoted comment, Mr. Crystal defined a neoconservative as a liberal who had been mugged by reality. Mr. Crystal translated his concerns into a magazine. In 1965, with a $10,000 contribution from a wealthy acquaintance, he founded the Public Interest magazine. Its founding is considered the beginning of neoconservatism. For more than 6 decades, beginning in 1942, when he and other recent graduates of City College founded Enquiry, a journal of independent radical thought, his life revolved around magazines. Besides the Public Interest, Mr. Crystal published, edited, and wrote for journals of opinion like Commentary, Encounter, The New Leader, The Reporter, and The National Interest. All were little magazines with limited circulation, but Mr. Crystal valued the quality of his readership more than the quantity. He said with a circulation of a few hundred, you could change the world. So he wrote for Commentary, founded the Public Interest, and also edited Encounter. Norman Podhoretz, his close friend, served as Commentary's editor-in-chief from 1960 until his retirement in 1995. He is still its editor-at-large. From 1981 to 1987, Podhoretz was an advisor to the U.S. Information Agency. From 1995 to 2003, he was a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. American-Israeli journalist Benjamin Ballant, and former editor at Commentary, described the magazine as the contentious magazine that transformed the Jewish left into the neoconservative right. Historian and literary critic Richard Pels said no other journal of the past half-century has been so consistently influential or so central to the major debates that have transformed the political and intellectual life of the United States. This is Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz. Now again, according to Ron Unz, according to Irving Kristol himself, according to the New York Times, it is these little magazines that they were founding which are changing the world. It's Irving Kristol at Encounter. It is Norman Podhoretz at Commentary. These are 2 magazines that they say are changing the world. What is the basis of their influence? What is the conversion? How are they changing the world? What is the basis of the neoconservative movement? Both Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz, the godfather and the patriarch of the neocon movement at these magazines, they are both Jews from New York City. They're both left-wing Jews. They're both deeply involved with the CIA. And both of them, after Israel was under attack, turned against the American left, against the radicals, turned against the Soviet Union, and gradually, from 1965 until 1975, transitioned from being Jewish leftists to neoconservatives. Now, Irving Kristol's comment is instructive. Irving Kristol's most famous adage is that the neocons, the essence of what it is to be a neocon, is that they were liberals who got mugged by reality. But let's deconstruct that. Who were the liberals that got mugged by reality? Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz. The liberals that got mugged by reality and became the neocons were Jewish leftists. They weren't liberals. They were Jewish leftists that got mugged by reality. In particular, they were Jewish leftists who were backed by the CIA that got mugged by reality. And how did they get mugged by reality? What is he referring to? How did the Jewish left turn into the neoconservative right? If the neocons or libs that got mugged by reality, what mugged them? What does that mean exactly? When Henry Kissinger said they were converted to geopolitical reality, what does he mean? Well, Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz say in their own words, they realized that the left had gone too radical when it turned against Israel. When the Soviet Union, under Leonid Brezhnev, started promulgating an anti-Israel doctrine, on the basis that Israel was a colonial capitalist power. When the Soviet Union backed Egypt and Syria to the hilt, so much so they almost defeated Israel. And when the non-Jewish American left turned against Israel and made those same arguments that Israel is racist, Israel's a settler colonial state, Israel is an outpost of capitalism and colonialism, that is how they got mugged by reality. The Jewish left got mugged by the non-Jewish Soviet Union and the non-Jewish American and European left that turned against Israel. Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz said, if Israel goes down, the whole Jewish future is in jeopardy. And who is pushing Israel to the brink of destruction? The left, the Soviet Union and the American left. And both Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz said, after Yom Kippur, they became increasingly pro-Jewish and they married their intense support for Israel to the anti-communism, anti-Soviet Union, Cold War hawk ideological position. Now, there's an interesting fact here. Irving Kristol founded or worked with Encounter magazine in the United Kingdom. Encounter magazine was funded by the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Irving Kristol was present at the founding of the Congress for Cultural Freedom in the 1950s. So that CIA effort to back left-wing anti-Stalinist intellectuals, to curb left-wing radicalism, to curb the Soviet intellectual penetration of America, Irving Kristol was there at its founding in Berlin in the 1950s, and his magazine Encounter got money from the Congress for Cultural Freedom through the CIA. That's the godfather of neoconservatism and public interest, who, according to the New York Times obituary, created the neocon movement when he founded that magazine. And Norman Podhoretz, who founded Commentary, he's the patriarch of the neocon movement. Norman Podhoretz hired Irving Kristol as a writer at Commentary, and Commentary is a project of the American Jewish Committee, which is the representative, that is the head of all the American Jewish groups. It goes back to 1904 and is involved deeply with the early Zionist movement, the State of Israel, and American Jewry. Are you starting to see? So the CIA from its very beginning is working with these Jewish refugees from Nazism, from the Soviets. The most ferocious Cold Warriors see the Jews and then later Israel as an asset against the Soviet Union. They start backing Jewish left-wing intellectuals, paying them to start up these magazines to curb their Stalinist pro-Soviet tendencies. But as the Cold War goes on, Israel becomes entrenched as an American ally. Israel's enemies become entrenched as Soviet allies. And as Israel comes into its own, as it develops a nuclear weapon, as it becomes armed by the United States and becomes something like a regional power, it comes into confrontation with Syria and Egypt, who are pushed into the corner of the Soviet Union, which supplies them with more and more weapons. And that makes the Soviet Union more and more anti-Israel. And finally, in '73, when this leads to a catastrophe, which is the Soviet Union backing an Arab invasion of Israel that almost destroys Israel, the Jewish left, backed by the CIA, gets mugged by reality. And they say now it's personal. Before, we were moderate leftists, backed by the CIA, generally pro-Jewish, but somewhat ambivalent about Zionism. They said they had this awakening. If Israel goes down, we all go down. And if Israel goes down, it'll be because of the communists, the American left, and their allies, the Arabs. And we have to redouble our efforts to defeat all of them. The American left, the Muslims, the Arabs, and the communists. And it is Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz, the leaders of neoconservatism, through their influential magazines paid by the CIA, that influenced the Jewish intelligentsia to abandon nothing about their liberal ideology other than their pacifism. The only conversion to speak of, they're still liberal, They're still center-left liberals, pro-immigration, pro-free markets, all this kind of stuff. The only thing they changed their mind on is we gotta destroy the Soviet Union because it's gonna destroy Israel first if we don't. Now, returning back to the original point here, William F. Buckley and Tucker Carlson say, you can attack the neocons all day, but if you, like Pat Buchanan, say that there's an amen corner in the US that's all Jewish, the Jews want the Gentiles to die in their wars, if you say it has anything to do with Judaism, you're a real anti-Semite and that's a problem. But the essence of neoconservatism is its Jewishness. And when you read the godfathers of neoconservatism, they're not ambiguous about it at all. Irving Kristol said, notes on the Yom Kippur War. I sense deep down whatever happens to Israel is decisive for Jewish history and for the lives of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The whole of the Jewish past and future is at stake. That's the godfather of neoconservatism on why he founded neoconservatism. And the why is that if Israel's destroyed, then my Jewish grandchildren will not live healthy, prosperous lives. And you're telling me neoconservatism has nothing to do with Jewishness? Norm Podhoretz, his magazine was created by the American Jewish Committee. And he said the same thing. After Yom Kippur, he said he would become more aggressive than ever in defending Jewish interests at home and abroad. These are indisputably the godfathers of neoconservatism. They each founded the most important publications that created the neocon movement, Public Interest and Commentary. And they say they went from Jewish left to neocon right because Israel was almost destroyed by the Soviet Union. That's what makes them neocons, and that's why they want America to fight the Soviet Union and the Soviets' client states in the Middle East. Egypt, Syria, and then later Iraq, Iran. Hello? And you're telling me that if we say that the Amen Corner, Rosenthal, Krauthammer, Kissinger, if we point out that they're all Jews, we're anti-Semitic? That's what it is. Now let's take it even a step further. You have not seen anything yet. You have seen nothing yet, because I am about to blow your fucking mind, okay? So Irving Kristol was there at the foundation of the Congress for Cultural Freedom in the 1950s. That's the CIA's program to fund these intellectual movements. Later, he's the godfather of neoconservatism. He creates a magazine called Encounter, which gets money from the CIA. He claims he'll defend Jewish interests at home and abroad after Yom Kippur for the sake of his Jewish children and grandchildren. His buddy, James Burnham, was at the founding board of National Review when Bill Buckley, who was also CIA, founded that magazine. Irving Kristol also undertook another project. Do you remember I talked about the Intercollegiate Studies Institute or the Intercollegiate Society of Individualists that William Buckley founded in 1953? Well, Irving Kristol did something very similar in 1979. Okay? How was William F. Buckley recruited? He was recruited at Yale by his professor, who was a CIA recruiter at Yale. That was his job. And when William F. Buckley graduated and created National Review, he hired his CIA recruiter professor on the board of National Review, as well as a Congress for Cultural Freedom founding member at his conservative magazine in the 50s. This is how the CIA operates. If you're the CIA, how do you find precocious intelligence assets? How do you find people that have a skill for intelligence? You go to the elite schools. Where do you find the smartest people? Where do you find the smartest, most high status, most elite people in American society? The Ivy League schools. You go to Yale. You go to Dartmouth. You go to Columbia. And you go to these 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds who are conservative-leaning. And you get their professors who teach them in their classes to pay attention and read their papers. Oh, William F. Buckley seems conservative. He would be a good fit for the CIA. He will help us win this intellectual Cold War. So the CIA gets faculty at the universities, at the Ivy Leagues, who teach the best and brightest, to monitor them, to groom them from a very early age, to watch their careers with great interest. This one's smart, this one's precocious, this one's conservative. He'd make a good CIA officer, and they groom them over time. They encourage those ideological tendencies. They encourage them to write. Bill Buckley wrote at the Yale Daily. Bill Buckley founded the National Review and a campus group with his CIA recruiter professor. This is how this stuff works. Now, Irving Kristol, his contemporary, who again is the godfather of neoconservatism, there at the founding of the Congress for Cultural Freedom with James Burnham, who was at the founding of National Review, Bill Buckley's paper. Irving Kristol, who founded Encounter, funded by the CIA. Irving Kristol. Irving Kristol, who said, I'm a neocon now because of the Yom Kippur War and my Jewish great-grandchildren. In 1979, Irving Kristol founds an organization called the Institute for Educational Affairs. This is the story about that group from Wikipedia. They responded to a request by 2 University of Chicago students for startup funding for a conservative newspaper called Counterpoint. Do you know who founded that magazine? John Podhoretz, Norm Podhoretz's father. So Irving Kristol and Norm Podhoretz found the neocon movement in the 1960s. In 1979, Irving Kristol starts up an educational group called the IEA, Institute for Educational Affairs, and Irving Kristol provides the startup money for Norm Podhoretz's kid, John, to found Counterpoint at the University of Chicago in '79. It gets better. By 1980, this grant program expands and is called the Collegiate Network. In 1990, the Madison Center for Educational Affairs merges with the IEA. They fund 57 conservative student publications. It takes them 10 years. Would you like to know which student newspapers this group founded? This group of Jewish neocons, led by Irving Kristol. Would you like to know which student newspapers they helped found with their seed money, with their funding? Well, the first was Counterpoint by Norm Podhoretz's kid, John, at University of Chicago in 1979. Then, the Princeton Tory at Princeton University, founded by Yoram Hazony in 1984. Yoram Hazony. Then, in 1987, the Stanford Review, founded by Peter Thiel. And the coup de grace, the Dartmouth Review, founded by Dinesh D'Souza. These are 4 of the publications that Irving Kristol's Institute for Educational Affairs provided the seed money for. Counterpoint by John Podhoretz at U Chicago. Princeton Tory by Yoram Hazony at Princeton in '84. Stanford Review by Peter Thiel in 1987, and Dartmouth Review by Dinesh D'Souza at Dartmouth University. Irving Kristol provided the money for all those student newspapers. And as we've established, Irving Kristol is a CIA asset. He is there at the creation for the Congress for Cultural Freedom. He's the godfather of neoconservatism. He founded Policy Review, or the Policy Journal. He's at Commentary with Norm Podhoretz. He founds Encounter with money from the CIA. But it gets even better, because in 1995, this network, the Collegiate Network, the Institute for Educational Affairs, the Madison Center, they're overtaken by
Enemy troops have secured the objective.
ISI, the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, that group that William F. Buckley founded in 1953. To bring it all the way home, okay? So William F. Buckley is at Yale, like George Bush before him, like James Angleton before him. Bill Buckley's recruited by his professor into the CIA. they found ISI, Institute, what is it? The Intercollegiate Studies Institute. William F. Buckley founds National Review with Bill Burnham, who was there at the creation of the Congress for Cultural Freedom, an intellectual group paid by the CIA to fund campus groups, newspapers, radio stations. He's there with James Burnham, who is also there with Irving Kristol at its founding in Berlin in 1951. Later in the 1950s, he founds National Review with James Burnham and his professor and 3 other CIA agents. Irving Kristol starts up these CIA-funded magazines. They're Jewish left-wing publications that turn into Jewish neocon publications. They're funded by the American Jewish Committee and the CIA. And then Irving Kristol provides the seed money for Peter Thiel, Yoram Hazony, Dinesh D'Souza, and John Potter at student newspapers. After all that, in 95, it folds into ISI, which Bill Buckley founded in 1953. That's where it all starts. Now, what's interesting about Irving Kristol is that in the 60s, it was discovered that this was going on. Left-wing publications found out that the Congress for Cultural Freedom was backed by the CIA. So Irving Kristol quits and joins the American Enterprise Institute. Now, as I said before, this is a story about generations. Generations over time. You could say that was generation number 1. Let's talk about generation number 2. So if William F. Buckley got to start at Yale in the 1950s, let's now talk about Peter Thiel, Yoram Hazony. Let's talk about Dinesh D'Souza. Let's talk about John Podhoretz. Let's talk about generation number 2, which is, of course, funded and spawned from generation number 1. In 1995, Irving Kristol's son, Bill Kristol, founds the Weekly Standard. And it becomes the new preeminent neoconservative publication that Tucker Carlson writes for. Irving Kristol's kid, Bill Kristol, starts Weekly Standard. It's founded with the help of the News Corporation, that's Rupert Murdoch's company. And Tucker Carlson in 95 begs Bill Kristol to hire him at the magazine to write for them, where they push the Iraq War, the second Iraq War, in 2003, and become the most influential publication in favor of the war in Iraq. Let's talk a little bit about Yoram Hazony. Yoram Hazony gets money from Irving Kristol in 1984. Yoram Hazony is an Israeli Jew. He's from Israel. He studies in America, and then he goes back home to Israel. He founds the Herzl Institute, the Shalem Center. These are Jewish nationalist think tanks. This is Yoram Hazony. Yoram Hazony wrote an article in the 1990s about a figure named Kahana. Kahana was a Jewish extremist in Israel. I'll read to you some of his views. This is from his Wikipedia. It says, during his lifetime, Meir Kahana publicized his Kahanism ideology throughout the United States. In Israel, he proposed enforcing Jewish law as codified by Maimonides. While serving in the Knesset in the mid-1980s, Kahana proposed numerous laws, none of which passed, to emphasize Judaism in public schools, reduce Israel's bureaucracy, forbid sexual relations between Jews and non-Jews, separate Jewish and Arab neighborhoods, end cultural meetings between Jewish and Arab students. He went so far as to demand that non-Jews in Israel either become slaves or face deportation. This is a Jewish figure in Israel named Meir Kahana. Yoram Hazony had this to say about that figure in 1994. He wrote this. He wrote, "Here was a man who said what he meant and meant what he said. It was the first time we had ever seen that in a political leader. We were 17 years old, American Jews, children of Orthodox rabbis, educated in Zionist schools and yeshivas, students of the best Jewish institutions in the United States. Yet I don't believe any of us had ever heard the things we heard that day. If someone comes to kill you, kill him first. There is no such thing as innocent civilians in a war. Jewish lives come before those of non-Jews. A Jew should never be ashamed of being a Jew." This is Yoram Hazony on Meir Kahana. Kahana's message wasn't sophisticated, but it was clear, it was passionate. It affected us in a way nothing else ever had. He said that we had nothing to be ashamed of, that Jewish pride and strength were good things, that we could be proud of who we were, that we had a past worth knowing and a future worth building. We never adopted his political views, but he was the only Jewish leader who seemed to understand how much we wanted to be proud Jews. Kahana didn't tell us to be proud of someone else's interpretation of Judaism. He said Judaism was for us. We didn't need to hide it, to apologize for it, to downplay it in public. We didn't need to water it down. The Torah was ours. Our traditions were good. If we learned them and loved them, we would be strong. For the first time, we realized our schools had never taught us what it meant to be proud Jews. We'd been taught to fit in, to get along, to apologize for what we were, and we had done it well. Kahana's books made us want to be better Jews, stronger Jews, Jews who could live by the Torah without fear, Jews who would one day be fathers who would teach strength and dignity to their children, not hatred but pride. Now, for those that don't know who this figure is, Yoram Hazony, I'll give you some name drops. You might understand who he is after this. So Yoram Hazony, as I said, in 1984, got funding from Irving Kristol to start the Princeton Tory. 10 years later, he writes this article about Meir Kahana, who said that non-Jews should be enslaved by Jews or killed by Jews. And Hazony says, this guy's the real deal, this guy's awesome. Yoram Hazony is the mentor of Bari Weiss. After Bari Weiss graduated from Columbia University in 2005, she went to Israel to study at Yoram Hazony's Shalem Center. Yoram Hazony is the founder of the National Conservatism Conference, which was started up in 2022 with money from Peter Thiel. And it hosted J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Peter Thiel himself, and later, Tucker Carlson. That Yoram Hazony. So when you see the National Conservatism Conference, which has been going on for the past 3 or 4 years, which aimed to be the nationalist alternative to CPAC, where Vance, Josh Hawley, Ron DeSantis, Marco Rubio, Peter Thiel, and Tucker have sought to promulgate a new doctrine of nationalist conservatism. This is the founder of that group. This is the mentor of Bari Weiss. He is a Jewish extremist who says that this radical rabbi that wants all Jews to die or be slaves to the Jews is a really great guy and made us proud to be Jewish and all the rest. And he got money from Irving Kristol, probably as a grooming mechanism in '84 at the Princeton Tory. But it gets better. In 1987, the other student newspaper that got funding from Irving Kristol was Stanford Review by Peter Thiel. Now, we all know a lot about Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, 10 years later, goes on to start PayPal. How did he start PayPal? Well, he worked with the Israeli Jewish professor at Stanford University, who is the head of the cryptography department. Because the big question for how to create a peer-to-peer payment system in the age of the internet was solving the privacy question, solving cryptography. So PayPal was created by Peter Thiel and Max Levchin, another Jew, overseen by the Israeli Jewish head at Stanford University of cryptography. And thus PayPal was born. Peter Thiel banks his millions of dollars from PayPal, and just a year later, after they sell it, he founds Palantir with Alex Karp, who is Jewish, and Joe Lonsdale, who is Jewish. And Palantir's exclusive contract for the next 7 years is the CIA. Over a period of 2 or 3 years, they make 300 visits to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. After 2007, they branch out. They take on some new customers. They are the NSA, the FBI, the DHS, even the Department of Health and Human Services. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, all of it. Later on in Peter Thiel's life, he begins to fund all of these national conservative candidates. He hires J.D. Vance at his venture capital firm. He provides the seed money for J.D. Vance's independent venture capital firm. He funds J.D. Vance's Senate run to the tune of $15 million. And of course, among other things, Peter Thiel gives money to Yoram Hazony to found the National Conservatism Conference that J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, and Tucker Carlson speak at. That's Peter Thiel, who got money from the same group as Yoram Hazony. Peter Thiel also did business in PayPal with Mark Andreessen, who then went on to fund Bari Weiss's Austin University and did a podcast with her not too long ago, shortly after Peter Thiel himself. This is the network. And then, of course, we have to talk about J.D. Vance himself. If J.D. Vance is this arch political project, then we have to talk about J.D. Vance as maybe the third generation after the Peter Thiels and Yoram Hazonys. We already talked about J.D. Vance's connection to Tucker Carlson. We already talked about J.D. Vance's connection to Peter Thiel, Yoram Hazony. I'll remind you some things about J.D. Vance. In 2016, J.D. Vance did not vote for Donald Trump. A lot of people know that. He was a never-Trumper, an anti-Trumper. But he took it further than that. Vance did not just not vote for Donald Trump. He didn't not vote altogether. He voted for a third-party candidate. Vance voted for Evan McMullin. And for those who don't know, Evan McMullin was a former CIA officer who was handpicked by Bill Kristol, Irving Kristol's son, to run as a spoiler against Donald Trump in 2016 in the state of Utah. Bill Kristol, founder of Weekly Standard, who Tucker Carlson worked for, Bill Kristol, the son of Irving Kristol, who provided the money for Peter Thiel and Yoram Hazony to found their student newspapers, Kristol handpicked the CIA officer, Evan McMullin, to run against Trump, and J.D. Vance voted for that guy, voted for Evan McMullin. And then, when Evan McMullin lost and Donald Trump won the election in 2017, Vance got together with David Frum, a writer at the Weekly Standard, a member of the American Enterprise Institute, to plot out his comeback tour to take over the conservative movement. Vance is a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and also a graduate of Yale Law School, very much like William Buckley before him, like George Bush before him, and like James Angleton before him. To bring it all home, there's a last part of information, or piece of information I'll introduce here. I want to read to you what Yoram Hazony said about racialists. This was in an interview last week that was conveniently released by Ezra Klein at the New York Times last Friday, shortly before my episode, the first installment in the series last Friday. This is what Yoram Hazony had to say about the future of the right wing and racialism. He said, quote, "Let's talk about other people in the Trump administration. Figures like Michael Anton at the State Department, David Goldman, Bridge Colby at the Defense Department. There are many others like Stephen Miller. All these individuals are, to one degree or another, national conservatives. They attend our conferences, contribute, they're part of our movement. Notice who isn't part of it. From the beginning, we distinguished ourselves in two directions, from libertarians, essentially the liberal Republican wing to our left, and from racialists, anti-democratic movements to our right. Both sides have generated friction. The key question is whether there is a clear border between national conservatives